gotta go big or go home. We're down to the gold. Never been a better time to put it all on the line. Ooh, yeah. Time to put it all on the line.
Here we are again. It's your friends, your hosts, your partners here on this NFL journey. Ryan and Spencer, we are back for a long-awaited episode, no doubt about it. I mean, man, just getting in my feels about this one. We've been waiting. We saved this division for last. That was intentional on my part, mainly because I wanted to get myself acclimated to the talking about football on camera thing before we got into my team and my division. But that being said, I have been waiting a very, very long time to go over this, and we get to talk about my squad today, a few others. Ryan, how you been, man? We taken a break. It's been a minute.
Yeah, dude, I'm doing very well, I have to say. We moved into a new place recently. The move was a god-awful headache, but we are in now. We got the setup rocking and rolling. It was a really terrible move for reasons that I won't get into here, but otherwise I love the apartment. A lot more space. I have a more dedicated recording area now, otherwise once we got in here, everything has been all gravy, and I'm ready to get back into the swing of things here. I know that it's been a minute, but we did just release the NFC South episode, which, if I do say so myself, we discussed this. I think that's our best one yet. I hope everybody else is enjoying it as much as we did. We put nearly 3 hours on camera talking about the NFC South. But how about you, Spencer? How are you doing? How's life?
Life's good, man. Life's good. I've been missing this though. Like, honestly, it's been nearly 2 weeks since we recorded. I'm sure people are noticing in the episodes we're referencing things that happened forever ago at the time of the recording, but this will be the one where we're like,
the end of the last episode, I said, hope you have a good 4th of July. So that's...
Yeah, exactly. No, we're finally getting caught up here, so I'm really excited to be kind of summing up the breakdown series with you here, and we're going to have some fun going forward. We're going to get into the news cycle. There's been a whole lot of shit talking going on in the NFL, a whole lot of finger pointing, just drama galore, and we are just hardly out of training camp going into preseason as of this recording, so I'm sure there's a whole lot more to follow, but namely, that Sean Payton situation. I've just been sitting here kicking myself that we haven't been able to be on camera talking about all of that with Hackett and everything. It's just been very entertaining to watch.
Yeah, so incredibly funny. We can get into it. I know that we had one bit of content that we were planning on doing is, I don't know if you still want to do it, the quarterback tier list, or we could jump into some other news cycle things since it's been a minute since we've talked. But I know that we've got some other content planned, but you're absolutely right. There's been a lot of drama and shit talking that we've missed that I'm sad to say we weren't able to get covered in time. But that's okay. We're still learning. We're still figuring out how to do all of this and figure out the most efficient way to do this. I gotta say, after just doing this for a little bit, I gotta have a big shout out to people that do this full time, that can just get the camera up and go and riff and have something interesting to say, because the speed at which things happen and people move on to something else is very, very fast. And I just gotta say, I'm impressed with people that can manage to do it full time and stay on top of everything. But we'll get there. One day we'll get there.
It's a fast business. You got to react quick to these things, and you never really know when a headline's going to come out that, for better or for worse, you could potentially farm a lot of clicks off of. Obviously, that's the name of the game for this whole scene. But what better opportunity than a former coach calling out or getting called out by the new head coach? As a Seattle fan, I can say, it's been amazing. It's been fun watching some of my two least favorite teams in the NFL just battle each other and bicker back and forth, just causing added distractions for their coming season, where so much is riding on the seasons for both the Broncos and the Jets. I mean, it's kind of, I think it's a bit of a Hard Knocks side effect. You get bought into kind of that on-camera projecting your personality out there. But as Peyton said, I think he said he had his Fox hat on a little bit when he was saying some of those things, and I think he does kind of regret saying them. As a coach, you preach against, like, you don't want to cause additional distractions, protect the team. Well, you got to follow your own advice sometimes, As much as I love Sean Payton, he's an excellent coach. I think he would walk that back, and he said so himself,
Right.
But that being said, I don't want to take up too much of the time with the intro here. We should jump
People
right
who
in.
are not limited on talking shit, you and I think this is a great place to start with this first team.
Right. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of shit talked in this episode, to be completely honest.
So without further ado, why don't we go ahead and kick it off with the Arizona Cardinals. So we're not going to say anything I think that people are going to disagree with here. This team sucks. The Cardinals are straight up not good. After I do want to say that I was overall very skeptical from the beginning of the Cliff Kingsbury experiment. They went ahead and, they went all in. They got Cliff Kingsbury, and that year I just remember that was the Kyler year, and I was like, Kyler's our guy. It's Kyler and Cliff, and that is what's going to take us to the promised land, baby. And there were people that were skeptical of that, myself included. I think that this is really what, life in America is all about, right? You go get a job that pays you a ton of money, and then you can go move to Thailand, and nobody's ever going to see your face again. Right. You can just go ahead and you can tank a franchise, and then you can wipe yourself off the face of the planet. No, but in all seriousness, this roster is rough. I do think that, moving on from Cliff Kingsbury, or if he left, I think that there was some mutual strife there. But bringing in Jonathan Gannon, I think is going to be an excellent move going forward. The former Eagles defensive coordinator is going to come in and take over for Cliff Kingsbury, and it is quite the roster that he is inheriting here. They did have some interesting off-season additions, I would say. Mostly the biggest fan, I guess, is where I'm going to start is with the offensive line. I really like the Paris Johnson pick. Despite the fact that I think that they have a bottom 5 offensive line in the league, Paris Johnson, I think, gives this line a very decent high chance of some upside in the future. But otherwise, it's looking pretty bleak to me. The interior O-line remains the biggest weakness, I think. Just taking a look at the depth chart, that's something that I noticed right away, which is just really unfortunate, considering that they're going to have to run the ball a lot without a premier running back. Certainly, James Conner is no slouch. But, with no Kyler Murray back there to work any magic, and with, James Conner having to take a lot of the workload for the beginning parts of the season while Kyler Murray is not there, having an O-line like this is not a recipe for success. They were tied for the most penalized O-league in the league last year with 44. Humphreys and Johnson ought to make a strong duo on the O-line, but there are considerable concerns coming into 2023. And, I got to say, I was thinking about this the other day as well. The fact that, James Conner is there, and people, like, just for fantasy purposes, right, have been talking about James Conner potentially having a lot of upside just because they're going to have to run the ball a lot. They're not going to be able to get it done through the air, I don't imagine. But there's so much going on right now in terms of the running back market. And I just want to take a quick rewind. I think it was like 2015, 2016 was the Le'Veon Bell holdout year. He held out for, I believe it was an entire season, if I'm not mistaken. And James Conner came in, and he had an incredible story. He had beat cancer, and now he was back in the NFL. And after Le'Veon Bell took a year off, James Conner went in and proved that, one of the premier running backs in the entire NFL was mostly a product of scheme and a great offensive line. That's a complete side note. I'm sure we can have our own episode about this. I just thought it was interesting, that they're going to be leaning on a guy that, in my view, maybe started all of this mess that we're in right now with the running back market. But yeah, just taking a quick look, initial look at the depth chart here. I do like Humphreys at the left tackle spot. He's going to be solid, and I think Paris Johnson is going to provide a lot of upside for this offensive line in the future. But, mostly where I have concerns is with Elijah Wilkinson and with Will Hernandez there at the guard positions. Just don't know if they're going to be able to get it done with what they're going to need to do offensively. I think they're fully in a rebuild year, if not a tank for Caleb year. What are your thoughts?
As far as the tank for Caleb thing goes, they're in a pretty intense competition without having even played the first game of the season with their other kind of lost puppy in the division in the LA Rams, in my opinion. I think both of these teams have kind of shown their hand already in terms of what they're trying to accomplish this year, which is ideally nothing.
Right.
I don't think we know the Cardinals, different regime. But that being said, the ownership is still the same, and I believe it's Michael Bidwell, right? He's shown no kind of hesitancy to move the era on earlier than maybe other people expect. We saw it with the Rosen to Murray transition, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see the similar transition occurring between Murray to Caleb Williams if they were able to luck into the first overall this coming season. But that being said, I want to backpedal a little bit to Jonathan Gannon. I personally, I liken his situation a lot to Nick Sirianni's last year with Philly. I feel like the Sirianni hire was ridiculed a ton initially. I think you'll even recall he had that kind of infamous moment on the podium where he's just kind of tripping over his words. Mm-hmm. Seems like he's not really together. And how could you be, right? I mean, Philly was in a completely different situation.
Right.
And he was a very unproven candidate. I'm sure the guy was extremely nervous. And I think Jonathan Gannon is having a similar thing where you probably saw the clip. Everybody else that follows this division saw it and laughed at it, which was Jonathan Gannon coming up to, I believe, Rondell Moore and saying, we're going to be shooting fireworks. We're going to be deep shots. Deep shots. And, that just comes off insanely corny to me. Unbelievable stuff from Jonathan Gannon. And as someone who was honestly, like from that Nick Sirianni interview, I was a Nick Sirianni denier, to say the least, coming into that season. And at the risk of making myself look foolish again, because Nick Sirianni proved me wrong with that situation,
sure,
turned into an incredible head coach in his own right. I'm going to have to vote against Jonathan Gannon as being the guy for the job in this situation. Just kind of the lack of relatability with the players that he shows through the kind of that particular thing. And I don't want to overreact to just a viral clip where, he's just a kind of a goofy guy trying to relate to the players. But I don't know. I get the vibe from him, a young a young head coach kind of leading his development along Shane Steichen in Philly. I feel a lot better about Shane Steichen as a coach because I liked a lot more what I saw from the offensive scheming and things in Philly. Whereas with the defensive scheming with Philly, there were times where they took their foot off the gas and honestly nearly cost that team games late in the season. Made it problematic for Philly in the postseason even. I think that's why I look at Philly bringing in Sean Desai. We talked about that. I look at that as an obvious upgrade. I think Sean Desai is a much better coach in this league than Jonathan Gannon. In fact, I think if you plugged Sean Desai in the head coach role, I'd probably feel a lot stronger about him right now for the Cardinals. But yeah, that's just kind of contextualizing where they're at as a team. Maybe they prove me wrong, but I'm not feeling super great about the current direction, and he's not getting a good hand by any means coming into this Arizona situation. We're talking about a squad that, similar to kind of Denver last season to me, you're in one of the most, at the time, was one of the most competitive divisions in the entire league in the NFC West.
Yeah, not long ago.
No, and still quite relatively still good. Just there was some drop off, but at the time it was unquestionably the most competitive. To me, you had the Rams cooking with their Super Bowl run that they were making.
Yep.
Seahawks were no slouch at the time with Russell Wilson at the helm, even though they had their troubles. And then San Francisco, they've just been doing what they've been doing the last basically 6 years, essentially, just kind of steamrolling squads and starting whoever the hell they can find at quarterback while doing it. And to me, that's kind of what the Cardinals got trapped in from a philosophy standpoint. You get into a tough division, you decide we need to go all in. This is the year. We have rookie Kyler Murray. We're going to make all these free agent ads to go get J.J. Watt. We're going to make trades for Marquise Brown. Even Zach Ertz, the trade for Zach Ertz. A whole lot of win-now moves that cost cap, cost draft assets, cost a lot of things that were going to allow the Cardinals to kind of ease themselves into this rebuild that they're potentially looking at here. Kyler Murray or not, I think that's what this team's destined for, and unfortunately those past decisions have kind of made it's going to be difficult to overcome kind of what the bed that they were made, so to speak. And I know I'm getting kind of abstract with what I'm talking about here,
no,
but
I couldn't agree with you
I
more.
think that's kind of where they're at, right? Even in not looking at the roster, like they're just in a lot of trouble right now.
Yeah, no, I really couldn't agree with you more. I mean, there could be a whole video that we do just on this team called "The Haunting of Josh Rosen." That to me is like where it really, really began to just fall apart. I mean, but that just goes to show, right, that like being a GM in the NFL, it's very easy for guys like us, sit here and say like, oh, there's no brainer, no doubt, or like blue chip player.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show that, somebody that shows a lot of talent and potential at the college level, if they don't go to the NFL and perform, but you spent heavy draft capital in order to acquire that player, it could set you back a long, long time. I mean, especially right now, this team, I think at the very least is like 6 or 7 years away from really competing with anyone. I think they are just completely in a full rebuild right now. They ought to be, in my opinion.
It's going to depend on whether they get Caleb Williams, I would imagine. But
yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, if same thing, right? Like Caleb Williams is just about the most blue chip quarterback stock, so to speak, that we've seen in a long time, perhaps since Andrew Luck. But that just goes to show that, if you aren't able to execute on those picks that you have and you spend an awful lot of capital trying to acquire players like that, it ends up being really, really tough when they not only end up not working out, but especially if they become unemployed in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Josh Rosen
to go a
is
step
not even
further on what you're kind of sniffing at here is like, I think more than just any one thing, is it about executing your draft picks? Is it about getting the right free agents, right? I think this is all just a microcosm of a larger point that I think is huge with GMing in this league. And we see sort of a counterbalance between two teams in this division. One we'll get to in a moment with, I would say, Les Snead with the Rams versus what Steve Keim was doing with this squad. Identifying your window, I think, is one of the most important roles of a GM, is identifying when it's your time to strike. And I think some of the best GMs in the league, they maintain their reputation as such because of their ability to identify those windows, right? Philly, Howie Roseman. Howie Roseman is a great example of that, where he knows when to put the gas pedal down, but he also knows how to not go so far that you totally gash your future and you're just bleeding out for future years. And as much as people criticize the Rams and where they're at least they got a ring out of it, right? You could argue that the Cardinals went just as all in with everything they did as the Rams did, and they have nothing to show for it, and a couple of jobless guys in the former GM and head coach as well. But Les Snead, hanging on to his job for as long as he wants. And why is that? Because he identified the window and put the gas down at the right time. So, but to go, if I can go a little further, just with the roster itself.
Sure.
You know, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I will come to Kyler Murray's defense just a tad here.
He's defensible. I think he's defensible.
That's fair. I mean, I understand the pull of Caleb Williams 100%. But that being said, it's pretty rare we get a team that just completely dumpster dives as the expectations coming into the season project them to. Seattle's a great example. We were supposed to be in contention for the number 1 overall. Not saying this team has a turnaround, anything like that, but what I'm saying is that the odds of even getting the number 1 are very, very low. I mean, you even saw last year, the Bears had to get a last favor from their former head coach in Lovie Smith, where he finds a way to win that game at the end, and they end up with the 1st overall. So as a Cardinals, if you were a Cardinals fan from that perspective, I wouldn't be just talking yourself out of Kyler Murray and abandoning him at this point, because Caleb Williams is a pipe dream for you no matter what franchise you're a fan of. And Kyler Murray's not a horrible quarterback. Kyler Murray had some great years.
Yeah, certainly not. Yeah,
there was certainly some legit regression. Not all of which I would pile on to Cliff Kingsbury, but a lot of which I would pile on to Cliff Kingsbury. And, when you're playing in a college spread offense, they're doing their air raid style, whatever weird amalgamation of college strategies that don't work in the pros they were attempting. It's not going to make your quarterback look so great. And even that being said, Kyler Murray flashed a ton. One of the most electric runners in the league now still, as long as he gets back from that injury, somewhat like himself. But, you have to be encouraged on some level that there are no expectations for this squad coming in, because Kyler is going to have lots and lots of time to just ease himself back in, not overextend it or anything like that, And there's some future here. I would say, going back to what you said about the Paris Johnson pick, I like that pick as well. He's a legit, great, edge protector. He's got really, really smooth feet, everything you need. Just a really clean pass protector at the position. He needs a little bit more development, but just one of the best we've seen in a while. And they trade down, they acquire more assets. They even have an outside shot to trade up to the number 1 if that's what they want to go for, because of the fact that they moved back. So that's a good start. I think that's a gold star on their new GM's vest for a little while at least. He's got a hell of a lot more work to do, but I would say that's a good start for them at the very least.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, ironically, they may end up being in a very similar situation that the 49ers are in, where, Kyler comes back. I'm not sure if there's an exact timetable on when he's coming back, post ACL. But let's say they do end up having the number 1 overall pick. They have Kyler on the roster. If you have the number 1 overall pick, and if you're the Arizona Cardinals, there's no way I'm trading it, right? If you're there, you got to take Caleb Williams. So then you have, your so to speak, your Brock Purdy and your Trey Lance situation, and I think that's an incredibly unfair situation to both Caleb Williams and Kyler Murray if that were to transpire. But yeah, just ironically, if Kyler Murray even comes in, I mean, with this offense and the way that they've been playing, and off to a rough start, it's not out of the realm of possibility that they could end up getting Caleb Williams, and you have Kyler Murray and Caleb Williams in the locker room. So might be sooner rather than later that Kyler Murray finds himself a new home.
Yeah, I mean, if they look into Caleb Williams, Kyler's gone. I don't even think they spend a year together or anything like that. And the other thing with the Niners situation you have to remember is that they didn't luck into Lance. They traded up for Lance.
That's true.
And we'll get to that in a moment, because that was one of the bigger blunders, I would say, of the last 10 years of drafting. But, regardless, I like a little bit of what they did specifically in the draft, I'd say, on the offense. I just wanted to get into that really quick. Michael Wilson was a prospect I loved as a receiver. Him in round 3, that's really, really good value for just the polish and the overall skill set he brings. I mean, he's just a great all-around. I think if he works out, and the question mark is only health with him, if he can stay healthy and on the field, this guy's a legit X-receiver, not unlike maybe kind of a Drake London type of receiver, a little bit more juice than that, I'd say. But, Michael Wilson, that's a guy that one of my heroes, Doug Baldwin, swore by as, a former Stanford Cardinal himself. This was his guy. So I like that get for him. And, they bring in Clayton Tune. That's another one I would point toward. Clayton Tune's one of those guys, a little bit more upside for the position than you realize, considering where he's taken. flashed quite a
Right.
bit in college as well. If they are in a situation where they don't luck into Caleb Williams and Kyler just doesn't ever return to health again, this is a guy that you can have in your back pocket potentially developing. Who knows? Maybe you get something good from him down the line. So
Right.
I like the way that they hedged a little bit with the draft. And obviously investing in protection for whoever is going to be under center for you was just a great decision all around with Paris Johnson. So, again, like going back to what you said on the O-line, not a fan of this O-line at all.
Yeah.
The
It's
interior offensive line
rough.
is just abysmal. Thank God they have two dependable tackles in Humphreys and Johnson, but
Yes.
between Wilkinson, Froholtz, and they're trying to rehash Hernandez's career, who has really just been pretty bad himself since getting taken relatively high by the Giants before.
Yep.
This is going to be a liability to whoever's under center. Colt McCoy is going to have a really tough time, I would imagine, just all of the
Yeah.
interior pressure they're going to see. They have decent little collection of weapons, but from the beginning I was very against the decision to just load up with nothing but 5'10" dudes that run really fast.
Right.
I recognize how those skill sets align with what Kyler Murray's strengths are to some degree, but don't you want to bail a kind of a shorter guy out who maybe wants to go into more jump ball positions? I think that's what
Right.
they see in Michael Wilson a little more, is kind of giving you something a little different in the wide receiver core when they have so much of the same between Brown and Moore and even guys like Dortch. All talents that I like, but you
Right.
don't want three of the same dude in your
100%. And I mean,
room
that's
together.
that's sort of what's also really unfortunate about the DeAndre Hopkins debacle and, him requesting a trade and getting out because, to a certain extent, he was that guy. Like, he just had hands. He was a big body dude. Like, obviously there was that Hail Mary right at the very end that, like, I think you're totally right. Like, there's a very different formula that you need for a quarterback like Kyler Murray than, for example, somebody like Tua Tagovailoa, right? Because, like, I think the sort of maybe the successful formula with very specific tweaks made to that formula on the Dolphins versus with a situation like the Cardinals where you just have, basically a track team with good hands. But it's really unfortunate for all of the quarterbacks that are going to end up quarterbacking down there in Arizona that DeAndre Hopkins is no longer there. I mean, I ultimately think that was the right decision for his career. At this point, the Cardinals aren't competing for anything. That you want to go win. I don't know that you'd go to Tennessee to win. Listen to our episode where we talk about Tennessee as to why. But yeah, I completely agree. I mean, how different would this offense have looked if they had a bunch of guys that were, 6'2", 215 out there rather than, all these guys that were just, in retrospect, kind of gadget players. They would be gadget players in a lot of other offenses, being lined up out there at the X, Y, and Z spot. I don't
I
see
mean,
it.
Marquise Brown is a legit wide receiver, not necessarily
100%.
full-on gadget the way you might think of Rondale Moore to be, like you're describing. But, the reality of the 5'9" quarterback is that you're going to have to do things to kind of make up for that. You're going to attack the perimeter a lot more. You're going to have to do some more creative things underneath with wheels and, underneath dump-offs to guys like this. So creators, I saw the vision to some degree, and it made a hell of a lot more sense putting them in the same room as DeAndre Hopkins. But now that Hopkins is out of the picture, it's like, what are we looking at here? I mean, good Lord. But the last thing I will say before we move to defense is, James Conner, I actually, you said earlier, like, he was a product of the Pittsburgh system. I think it was a combination of both. I think the Pittsburgh
he's
system
very
is
talented
obviously
also.
incredible. Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's what I was just going to say. I think you're on the same page as me. Like, they just happen to have a highly talented back in James Conner. I'm a massive James Conner fan, personally.
Oh, same. Yeah.
It's not even just a fantasy thing. I mean, if you watch his tape, like, the ridiculous one-handed catches this guy makes and all of that. Like, James Conner's a special player, and honestly, I hope they trade him soon because I don't want him to waste his career or what's left of it on this team. But
Right.
okay, all right, great. Let's move to defense.
Let's move on here.
Because I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah, so looking at taking a look at the defense here, obviously you have Gannon taking over. He is taking over for a defense that was one of the worst in the league prior to losing players such as Zach Allen and Byron Murphy Jr. and J.J. Watt. They did add a couple of, veteran linebackers. And I do really, really like the BJ Ojulari pick. But overall, this unit, it's not good. I'm just gonna say it. I understand that it's a very easy thing for people like you and I to sit here and say that this is a not good unit. But I think just anybody
it's easy.
Anybody that's watched a lot of football, I don't know, man. Tell me what to be excited about here besides BJ Ojulari. What is there here that is to be excited about? Maybe one player is Budda Baker, who has at this point requested a trade. So that gives me a lot of hesitation as well. That maybe there's a lot of being on a team like this. It can't be good for the locker room culture, especially if you're a guy of Budda Baker's talent.
Yeah,
so
just a small correction too. They pampered up that contract with some bonuses this year, so he is going to be in the building for just at least.
He is staying. Okay.
Yeah, but the trade request stands. I mean, I
did
don't
request
see
a
this
trade,
to be
so
the long term.
Yeah, there's obviously going to be some locker room problems when you're in a unit like this with the sort of future that you have like this. I mean, especially it's a very, very rare, very, very rare thing to have a 10, 15, 17 year long career in the NFL. Most guys end up spending around 5 to 8 years in the NFL. And how much of that time do you want it to be spent losing 14 to 15 games a year and getting ridiculed week in and week out and not being utilized properly? I don't know. Just it's got to be frustrating on the player's behalf. So hopefully Gannon can come in. He's got quite the task in front of him to get this into a formidable defensive unit. But with Kyler Murray coming back from the torn ACL, which could make that keeping that defense off the field in the early parts of the season an incredible challenge. That to me is shaping up to be one of the worst in the league. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
going back to Budda, I mean, as far as where they stand with him, I think it's going to really depend on whether they can show something this season, or if they show nothing at all, period, then maybe if they get the number 1 overall, he'll be like, holy shit, yeah, I want to play with Caleb Williams. But besides that, I think they need to show him that they're progressing towards something significant before he changes his mind about that. Otherwise, this is just a stopgap to keep him in town for one more season, and then it's c'est la vie. But that being said, Budda Baker is an absolute dog, a killer out there. He will stonewall you in the run game. He's got amazing ball skills. I cry myself to sleep tonight every single day, knowing that he was right in our laps coming out of UW, the former Husky, and we didn't scoop him up because I just imagine his fit alongside Quandre Diggs in our defense. It would just be show-stopping, but. He's one of the only bright spots of let's call it guys who can come in and play and be legit starters right now that are going to pop in NFL defense. But what I will say, and I sense us trending toward a similar direction as when in the Raiders episode where we're just going to try to placate and be like, well, the future's a little bit brighter. But truthfully, I do feel this way. One guy I'd point to, Owen Popoe in round 5, is an absolute steal. If you watch this guy's tape, man, I mean, this guy's a freak of nature, dude, out there. Just so rangy. He's truly, if you play him at legit linebacker, he's going to be a sideline-to-sideline defender. But that being said, I don't know exactly where your plan is for him because he is just vicious on the inside. I mean, he will plant guys in the run game. He's got really great instincts to kind of pressuring the quarterback, even though he's not very polished in that regard at all. Doesn't really have any legit moves that he goes to. He's just got pretty solid play strength, good rush. He can bull rush a little bit. And then his speed outright. He can outmaneuver defenders at the college level. He showed that all throughout his tape. But that's a guy who I love as a selection. In round 5, I mean, I cannot believe he's there. Definitely one of the guys where his tape coming out that was one of my favorites of the whole class, hands down. I had this guy locked down as an early 3rd rounder in my book. 100%.
the comp I have for him is somebody like Demario Davis, where he's just incredibly instinctual. He can plug up the hole and he'll hit you hard. He can play coverage. He can play sideline to sideline. He's he is going to work out.
Just more
very,
freakishly
very
athletic than a Demario, even. I mean, this guy's just...
even more athletic than Demario Davis. But yeah, I couldn't
really.
agree
I
with you more.
think his game. I won't want to be crazy here, but I see a little bit of Parsons in his game, and just in terms of how fucking built this dude is, but he can move. He can just move with the best of them. I'm not saying he's anything close to Parsons, and probably never will be. But I mean, damn, I see some traits that are similar with him. Yeah. But going back to what you were saying about B.J. Ojulari, I did want to get to that pick. I love that pick from the perspective of trying to replicate kind of the Philly thing they got going on over there. He's got a lot of Hassan Reddick type of stuff to his game, kind of a tweener for the position. I know people are sick of hearing that. I mean, a lot of the best are tweeners for the position now. Speed rush, speed to power is kind of the name of the game for a lot of these hybrid defenses. But I really like his fit if that's the goal with Jonathan Gannon coming into town, is trying to bring some of those Philly defensive schemes in. And the other thing I'd say going back, he went back to his old team and scooped Kaiser White. Kaiser White was definitely underrated piece to that Philly defense last year, and stealing him away, he's a guy that's young, he's got upside, he's shown flashes of playing at a really high level, so similar to that TJ Edwards grab for Chicago, I like this one as well, except, they got him really, really cheap. May not have the same ceiling as a TJ Edwards, but, I mean, he's still young, who knows? I like his game as a player, I like what he does, so...
Yeah. Not really sure if there's anything else that I had that I wanted to point out. I think that the future, unfortunately, for 2023 is pretty bleak. But yeah, I really like the prospects that you pointed out. I think if those guys can end up working out, it's things like that can really turn around a team, right? Like if you're in the middle of a rebuild and you have some of your guys that were, third or fifth round picks, they end up becoming just complete stars. That really, really can help turn your team around in a really quick way. So for your Cardinals fans out there, I hope that's the case for you, because I think everybody better get buckled up for a pretty rough 2023 in my view.
Yeah, I mean, a few more swing positions, if I can chime a little bit more, just to give him something to work off of here, would be, I'm really interested to see what Isaiah Simmons does coming out. From what I understand, they're going to take him out of that middle linebacker role and play him at true safety at this point, which I find interesting. I'm really excited to see. I think that was a much better fit for his skill set from the beginning.
And I really liked Isaiah Simmons coming out of college when he was getting drafted. He was like... Yeah, like just his skill set alone, right? Like he was he kind of had like the Micah Parsons skill set before Michael Parsons was even a thing. Like very similar to a player like Patrick Queen, who's just freakishly athletic, could line up all over the field. I was a big fan of Isaiah Simmons. Coming out of that year, but I think just with his own skill set.
Sorry. Like you're just saying, just in terms of like he's such an incredible athlete for the position he's asked to play. Like the fact that this guy can even step in at linebacker and fill gaps, but also like play true over the top safety. Like he's so positionless in nature. I really like that.
Yeah, I actually did not know that they were planning on putting him in at true safety. So that'll be very interesting. I think that maybe really is a better fit for his skill set. Maybe he can come in and shine a little bit. Yeah.
That was the last one I wanted to mention, but other than that, I'm not too interested in what's going on here, to be completely frank. But, so let's move it over to the LA Rams here. I was going to start us off with this. Man, this is an interesting team to talk about. I mean, if you look at the media perceptions of this squad, I've noticed that it's like either people are like really in on this team or they're really, really out on this team, and there seems to be no in between. Which is interesting, because, I mean, I would argue looking at the draft class, and again, they weren't, like, working with a lot of, like, high-value assets in this class, but they had a ton of picks, and I think from what they told you with these selections, it really does point toward true rebuild, not retool, if you get what I'm saying. Like, if this feels like a best player available draft, or at least their version of it, something as close as they can. You know, you're only working with 1 second rounder, couple of thirds, a fourth, a whole bunch of fifths. So you're just really trying to build depth back up. And if the messaging for me is like, if you're trying to go back all in with your old Super Bowl core, so to speak, then you probably move a lot of these picks to get back up into those higher rounds. Like,
Right.
There was an opportunity to go about that, but I have to commend Les Snead in his decision to say, you know what, no, like, we got our ring, we did what we had to do that, and we're just going to fully embrace where we're at now with the roster. And to go a little further, if you need more evidence that this is a legit rebuild in LA, they're supposedly fielding calls from anybody you could think of that's untouchable on this roster. They're fielding calls for, and that includes Aaron Donald. And weirdly enough, they're listening to Aaron Donald offers. I mean, obviously you'd have to blow them out of the water to make it happen, but it's incredible that we're this closely removed from a Super Bowl run. And Matthew Stafford is a guy who was in legit trade talks as well. They're really obviously blowing this thing up, and the Jalen Ramsey trade was just another kind of symptom of that being the truth at the end of the day. But so similar position to the Cardinals, but and I'll get into it a little further. I'll let you go in a second, but what I would say is, like, I like the odds of this turnaround being a lot faster for the Rams than it would be for the Cardinals, and that's for a variety of reasons, which I'll get into. But what stood out to you in terms of just looking at the roster? Go right ahead.
Well, I mean, I just want to talk a little bit about what you were saying. That I will start off with, I agree. I think that there's been multiple indications, at least to me, that this is a complete rebuild at this point. But it's a rebuild that I think, if you're a Rams fan, you're pretty happy to see, just because it's all on house money, right? Like, this is what happens. What they did is, they sold the future, right? Like, the bill for selling the future to go all in and win the Super Bowl has unfortunately come due, and brother, that interest seems massive. To me, this is a team that got significantly worse in the offseason. But it's a decent place to be in. I think if you're a Rams fan, like, that's what you got to do, right? We were just talking about GMs identifying opportunities to go all in and win the thing, and they've done that. And I really liked your point to what you were saying about that this is going to be a quicker rebuild, maybe than we've seen from other players in the past. I mean, especially if you have the assets that you have, right? If Stafford's on the table, which I think they're not going to get nearly as high of a price for him as they want, we can get into that. But if you're willing to trade Cup,
right?
If they move him at all,
close to retiring at this point.
Yeah. But if you're looking at moving Donald or possibly Cup or some of these like major assets, then you're going to get multiple high round picks for these guys. So a rebuild is probably going to be a much faster turnaround than people are used to seeing. But that's just one point that I wanted to make, is that even though this team did get significantly worse in the offseason, it's all on house money, baby. You got the ring, so you take that to the bank, and you're happy to pay those bills, I think.
Yeah.
But just with the injuries to Matt Stafford, Van Jefferson, Aaron Donald, and Cooper Kupp last year, it makes sense to start rebuilding, right? Like, there's no guarantee that somebody like Stafford, who is now 35, or Donald, who's 31, can stay healthy at all. So it's time to look toward the future, and I think that what they did in the draft, you're totally right. Like, they didn't have a first round pick, but to me, they took best player available, which, if you're in a rebuild, that's the way to do it. Losing player. Oh, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, to make my point a little further, like, we're gonna get into the roster in a moment, but what I'll say is, like, if you're Sean McVay, ball, and you're looking at this offensive depth chart, and this is not a Super Bowl offense, not even close. It really just is not, no matter how good your head coach is. But that being said, going back to Les Snead, like, the difference between the Cardinals and the Rams in these similar positions is absolutely fucking night and day. Like, we're talking about the first true year in which the Rams have actually intentionally decided to rebuild. Last year, they were getting Bobby Wagner gearing up for another Super Bowl run potentially. And now this year, I find it incredibly impressive that in the very first year of deciding that and leaning into that, you come into the draft and you have 14 selections in the draft. I mean, like I said, they're not all high value assets, but regardless, I mean, that's pretty incredible to turn around the roster the way he has and reaccrue those assets back. And even for me, like, I wasn't the hugest fan of this draft class personally, but even if these guys are just replacement level at best, a lot of them, like, you're still building some depth here. These are still guys you like that fit your scheme. To get into the offense, like, I think Steve Avila was a pretty good, like, it seems it's like such a prototypical rebuilding pick. Like,
right.
Well, I don't know. Let's just take the guard. Like, it's a safe position. Let's take a guard. But for the thing with Steve Avila as a prospect, like, he's one of the safest prospects of this draft class because of just how you just know exactly what you're getting in this guy. He's very steady, very solid, just kind of a grown man at that position already, and he was a part of a championship bloodline over there in TCU, one of the high impact guys for that squad. So I like that selection. And then going a little further down, like, I thought the round 5 pick for Puka Nacua was, like, really, really smart on Les Snead's part. This is a really shifty, classic kind of slot guy, but a whole lot of speed he brings, and his tape was really fun to watch at BYU. Really, the name of the game with him is injury risk, just due to his size, but that's another selection I liked. And going over the roster itself, like, it's not a Super Bowl roster, but you're building up depth, and you're going to try and turn over these positions as subtly as you can. The thing you got to take advantage of from a roster building standpoint right now, if you're the Rams, is we have these vets in the room to train these guys up and at least get them understanding of what the expectation is, what the system implies, right? Cooper Kupp is going to be a great resource to these young guys, and Tutu Atwell coming into his 3rd season, I believe. Puka Nacua, that's going to be huge to have Cooper Kupp in the room to teach these guys. And same with Steve Avila, I mean, Rob Havenstein, he's not an amazing player in his own right, but they do have some vets in there that can take those guys under their arm a little bit. So,
I couldn't agree more. Despite not having a first-round pick, they did get a lot of assets. And, like that, I think that's another thing, too, that as we've done these breakdowns that I've noticed a lot is that there's a lot of teams that have really talented rosters, but then as soon as you take a look at the depth, is where, you start to get question marks, because injuries are a very common thing in the NFL, unfortunately. So if you don't have a lot of depth, then, things tend to not go your way sometimes. So I like this, approach of just let's sort of just take a wide spread of the board here. Let's take some D-line, O-line, some secondary, some receivers. Let's draft a quarterback. I liked that approach. I think although, Steve Avila and Byron Young, they're probably going to be the only starters. They have a lot to look forward to excuse me. They have a lot to look forward to as far as, the draft goes, to continue to find and develop cheap talent, which they're going to have to do because their future is still sold up to this point. I don't know when's the next time they have another first-round pick, but it's not for a while. So that's going to be where they're going to have to find their crop.
They're going to have to make their own luck in a lot of ways. And I think not so subtly, you look at all of these players, what's kind of the common theme with a lot of them, from Warren McClendon, who they selected, Alaric Jackson. I think if he wasn't a draft pick, he was an undrafted free agent potentially. But, these are all guys who are project players. They're not going to come in and have any legit impact. And what's least climactic for year one impact than a guard selection, right?
Right.
Like even Zach Evans, he's just a rotational back. So, like, I think not so subtly, this was a nod from Les Snead to be like, we were a really freaking bad team last year. Let's build depth. Let's get good project guys, but let's not get any guys who are going to make us any better this season. So, that way we at least are positioning ourselves to have a really good shot at that number 1 overall if things turn
Right.
out great. You could argue, you know, when you got Stafford, Kupp, and Aaron Donald on your squad, maybe you are never going to end up at the number 1 overall spot. But, you know, crazier things have happened, and besides those 3 guys, it is a whole lot of nothing other than that for the roster overall. So I think that's kind of the plan, you know. Let's see if we can win the lottery this year, and otherwise we're just moving to this next era however we can, you know.
Right. All right. So let's take a look at the defense here. So obviously they lost some key pieces, namely the departure of Jalen Ramsey and Leonard Floyd, Bobby Wagner, who has come back on a homecoming tour, from what I understand. Taylor Rapp, Nick Scott, and David Long Jr. are no longer there. Just the biggest thing that stands out to me about that is that so many of the key pieces that made this a Super Bowl winning team are no longer there. Von Miller departed last offseason to go over to the Bills, and the Rams pass rush was just not the same. They went from 50 sacks in 2021 to just 38 sacks in 2022. Pretty big drop off there. Then they traded Jalen Ramsey and released Leonard Floyd and Bobby Wagner, and lost Taylor Rapp, Nick Scott, and David Long Jr. as well. But Les Snead, I think you were saying he does deserve a little bit of credit, just for landing Byron Young and Kobe Turner. I also really liked in the 3rd round, but offseason roster movement. I think was just they lost too many pieces. It's just I think that their net there is not it's still in the negative, so to speak.
For everything we just said about the offense, being not that great, like it says enough about the defense to just say this statement: the offense is the strength of this team.
Yeah.
The defense that we're looking at here, I mean, it truly is Aaron Donald and nothing else. Even Byron Young, again, going back to him, yes, he's going to get a lot of snaps year 1. That's not ideal. That's not because they want him to play a lot. It's because they have to. He's sort of a project player in of itself. And that's kind of the position they're in. They're going to have to roll guys out who are nowhere near starting level because of what the situation they're in. But like you said with the losses, at least they were able to flip a good amount of those guys for draft capital, or just move off of them without having to pay anything. I can't remember exactly what they did with Leonard Floyd, but they could have very well talked themselves into re-signing him to way more money than they would than anybody else would have been willing to give.
Yeah, they just released him. Yeah,
just outright released him. I think that's a net win when you think about what the dollar amount would have cost to keep him in town.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say it more simply than this. They were not a good defense last year, and I think they're going to take a pretty significant step back as a regression as a whole in this unit, coming into this season. So, that's it's going to be interesting considering and there are some things like I think that Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and even Skowarnick. You also do have Higbee. I think they can keep the defense off the field. Just a
little bit. They have some threats.
They do have some threats. But they are not an offense that's going to win any shootouts like we've seen in the past. And this is not a defense that's going to prevent yards or points. So I think it's just poised to not be a very good Rams season, which I gotta say, there's a little bit of spite in me that just kind of loves that. I don't know about you.
Oh, I love it. I can't stand the Rams personally. I mean, I'll be completely honest with you. It has nothing to do with my hatred of pretty much all of these teams. That I think these last 2 teams are bottom feeders. I just think it's pretty much a fact, and it's amazing to me that any subsect of the media is in on this squad. Personally,
couldn't be me.
I don't see any kind of last year's Seahawks vibes here, even with McVay at the helm. And what you were saying earlier about keeping the defense off the field a little bit, that's going to be almost all the way to do with what McVay is going to be able to make happen from the offensive standpoint. Hopefully Matt Stafford can turn in a healthy season. But I mean, if they get into a situation where they have to start picking between Ripien and Stetson Bennett in year one, then you can pretty much guarantee a first overall pick for this.
All of
squad.
our Broncos fans out there can they can testify to the fact that Brett Rippin cannot rip it.
Brett Rippin, he's not ripping it like the good old days, I guess. If they're,
I mean,
were
what
any.
like Stetson Bennett, not too much younger than Matt Stafford. old man River getting drafted in the 4th round.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a good backup. I actually
Sure.
really like Stetson from that perspective. Like, you just take him to be strictly your backup. He's got a lot of experience, a lot of snaps under his belt. But,
You can make a good living as a backup.
Right,
these days.
Ryan, we're talking about the defense here. Stay on track, bro.
Right.
We don't know what we're doing with these teams, folks. I'm at a loss, to be honest, what to even say here. But
to be completely frank with you, if Aaron Donald can't even come back and play at an elite level after that ankle injury, which is no guarantee that he can do that, if Aaron Donald goes down,
from a health perspective, you mean strictly?
Yes, correct. Yeah, from a health perspective.
I'm not going to stand for this blasphemy if you're saying
no. If he's on the field, I just if he's on the field, he's going to do his thing. But if he's nursing that ankle a little bit, or if it continues to bother him being a persistent injury or anything like that, or if he comes off the field at all, who boy, it's like they can take that ride from SoFi Stadium right down to Disneyland, and they can ride that ride that just complete vertical drop, and it'd be the same exact experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me do my de facto Raiders take here and give you guys some things to take away to feel better if you're a Rams fan. Not that I care how you feel, but a few guys that I like on the squad. The secondary is one I'd point toward. Not the safety spot. Really don't like the safeties. None of these guys are safeties of the future. That's a big reason why they bring in John Johnson III for a comeback stint with the team, because I don't think they're confident in either the starters, to be honest. But that being said, the corner spot, I was a big fan of the Robert Rochelle selection a year ago, I believe. This guy plays a really physical, angry brand for that spot. I kind of liken him to like a Christian Fulton for the Titans not too long ago.
Actually, yeah.
But he's got a little Brandon Browner in him too. Like he's kind of got some bricks for hands, so to speak.
Right.
He's really good in press, a really chippy guy. Interested to see how he develops, because he could be a legit piece for them down the road, and has already flashed quite a bit in spots where he had to start. But and then a couple other guys, right? Kobe Durant was actually one of the few bright spots of kind of the last year's defense as well. Had some good moments. I'm interested to see where he slots in. I'm not really sure he has outside skill set necessarily. I think he's probably projects more as a nickel down the road, but again, they just don't have a lot of options. So for better or for worse, he's going to start on the outside most likely. And then the final guy I'd go with, another guy I really liked out of the draft was Trey Tomlinson. They seem to like their TCU guys here. They must have been watching that natty, because they grabbed, I believe, a couple of Georgia guys, a couple of TCU guys. So they had their eyes on what was going on in the field that day. But back to Trey Tomlinson. Similar brand to a Robert Rochelle as well. Another chippy guy. I think it's worth mentioning also, I believe, the nephew of LaDainian Tomlinson. Maybe people don't know that.
I did not know that.
Good bloodline with this kid. Definitely athletic out there on the field and looks the part. I think that he's going to definitely start off as their nickel, most likely. Maybe doing a little bit of safety work here and there, interchangeable somewhat. But I would view him as the long-term outside starter to go with Rochelle if they do choose to keep Rochelle and stay with him. And then maybe I see Kobe Durant kind of dropping down to that nickel spot once Trey's had a year or two under his belt. But yeah, I like Trey Tomlinson. That they've got a type at corner. I think Jalen Ramsey showed you that. They want guys to talk a lot on the field and just get their hands on receivers, and it's a good brand to play. It allows them probably in what's going to be a tough year to maybe find a way into games. I would say just kind of out hustling you, out wanting you on some of these. So. Yeah, as much as I think they'll be definitely in contention for the number one overall, that's a bright spot that I really like. They're going an interesting direction with the secondary. Even if all of those guys are depth players, they're good depth players, 100%. So,
Yeah.
all right, that's enough. Quote unquote glazing for the Rams. I really don't have much to give besides that. But
Right.
Taking it over to the Niners, Ryan. It's your turn to kick us off. I've been waiting for this for a long time to talk about this squad here and the next one as well.
Yeah, so you and I had a little bit of a discussion on this team the other day.
Couldn't help ourselves.
We couldn't help ourselves. But you know, I just have a lot of good things to say. I mean, how can you not? Like, just with a team that, you know, first won the NFC West, went 13-4. They were sixth in points for, and they were first in points against. So, you know, your point differential there is just absolutely massive. They were able to keep to some, you know, key additions and re-signings were, you know, Javon Hargrave. I thought bringing in Sam Darnold was really smart. We'll get more into that. They also, you know, brought in Isaiah Oliver. Clelin Ferrell, not a huge fan of that, but maybe they can do something with him. Maybe he's still a little bit of a project that they see. They did lose Jimmy Garoppolo and Mike McGlinchey on the offensive side of the ball, which I think is overall a net good. I don't see what good Jimmy G can provide for you at this point. Yeah, you know, let's take a little bit of a look at the offense here. The ESPN depth chart has Brock Purdy listed as quarterback 1. I think that that's a fluid position as of right now. Obviously, I don't know if do you know if Purdy is going to be starting at the beginning of the season? I don't know exactly where his rehab is at this point.
Yeah, he's trending toward it. He's getting a majority of the training camp snaps as they ramp him up. I was actually just reading something about it. He had a pretty good day today at training camp. They're still working him back from that injury. Obviously, the arm is, you know, I don't think they have to completely remake his throwing motion necessarily from it, but I do think that we'll get to I'm a little critical of how much they're playing him right now, considering, you know, he's not all the way back as far as I can tell, but
right,
he's trending toward it.
Well, you know, despite that, I think, you know, bringing in Sam Darnold, he somebody that has kind of gotten the short end of the stick, in my view. He could come in and, like, obviously they've never needed a superstar to come in at the helm for San Francisco to, you know, earn a lot of points and to get the ball downfield. Because, I mean, my God, look at the depth chart. You have Christian McCaffrey, who obviously is probably, in my view, the best running back in the NFL. And backing him up, you also have Elijah Mitchell, who is no slouch. And then, you know, looking at the wide receivers, you have Deebo Samuel, who I'm a huge fan of, and Brandon Ayuk has really broken out in a really nice way. There's a lot of people that are super high on him coming into the season, which I'm glad for, because he had a bit of a rough start to his career. But I'm happy to see that he's doing much better. Mm-hmm. People are really in on his production upside this year from a fantasy perspective. You know, obviously you do have George Kittle, a top 3 tight end in the NFL, even have the best fullback in the NFL in Kyle Juszczyk. And then on the O-line, you know, maybe there's some spots here that can, you know, be improved on. Trent Williams is, you know, continues to be a PFF top graded offensive lineman. The bad news about this O-line is I think that they're a little bit unproven. If I had to pick a criticism, you do have Banks, Burford, and McKivitz that were all recent draft picks. So they have upside to develop into really solid starters. You know, but you know they are inexperienced. They don't have a lot of snaps under their belt yet, and if any of them fail to sort of live up to that potential, it could put a lot of strain on whoever ends up quarterbacking for the rest of the season. You know, they do have Feliciano in reserve along with Matt Pryor. So that will at least give them some insurance at depth if any of those guys are really really struggling. But it's still pretty hard to say that they're not going to be a good O-line, considering that Christian McCaffrey in the running game, it just creates opportunities by himself. So I don't think that's going to impact him too much. But it could take a little bit of getting used to for this O-line. But otherwise, this is one of the better offenses just in general. I think as of right now, they're still a top 5 offense in the NFL. I love their wide receiving core. I think just the biggest question to me is what's going to be the answer at quarterback. Obviously, we saw what Purdy can do. He won a lot of games and was impressing early on in his tenure as the starter there in San Francisco. But I know that you're chomping at the bit here to give us some of your takes here on the quarterback situation.
Yeah. Before I even go, I need you to qualify that statement. You said they're certainly a top 5 offense in the league. Does that mean with Brock Purdy at the helm, or does that mean with any of these 3 at the helm?
I think with Darnold or Purdy, they're going to be a top 5 just production offense in the league. Trey Lance, I think it's hard for me to even say whether or not he's a quality starter. I don't think we've seen enough of him play yet. To me, I liken him to somebody like Desmond Ridder. He's maybe had a start or two that, he's potentially shown flashes, or has he even had a start up to this point? I think he's maybe had 1 or 2. But yeah, to me, that's just an ultimate question mark. If Trey, I don't see him winning the job at camp. In fact, I think the only reason that they are keeping him on the depth chart is because, and the NFL even recognized that this was a problem, because that NFC Championship game was just sad to see. When Purdy went down, they just didn't have another quarterback to go out there and play.
His words, not mine. I wasn't sad, to be clear, but Yeah,
I am not. I'm not a 49ers hater. They are a very annoying team, just as another fan of an NFC team.
Yeah, annoyingly good for
annoyingly
quite a while now.
good.
That's fair.
But I'm a huge fan of Kyle Shanahan, what he's been able to do with this offense. He is a premier play caller, play designer in the NFL, in my opinion. Yeah, so I think if Purdy isn't ready to go week 1, I think Darnold should be able to come in and do a very serviceable job. Maybe even get the team off to a few early wins just as a game manager. They've never really had a star quarterback that to go out there and win them football games. Yeah, I would say just as long as it's Purdy or Donald, they're going to be a very productive offense.
Right. I mean, I agree. Okay, so I get conflicted when talking about the 49ers, right?
Sure.
Because obviously I'm not a fan of anyone on the 49ers or the coach or anything like that, but I will say I'm an admirer of Kyle Shanahan's work. The scheme.
How can you not, just as a football fan,
he's implemented, right? 100%. And, in many people's eyes, he's kind of the progenitor of the modern NFL offense. Mm-hmm. You see his influence scattered all throughout the league in terms of, the coaching tree. You have, even McVay kind of fits into his tree in a lot of ways, even though I know they were more kind of...
contemporaries, really.
Contemporaries, right, thank you. But more so, I think that there comes a point with any ideology or philosophy from a football standpoint where your belief system begins to run a little thin. And I don't even know if it's always, sometimes it can be from the player perspective, right? Or sometimes it can be from the fan perspective, or sometimes it can be from the fact that the NFL is continually evolving. And I'm not trying to say necessarily that his scheme is archaic by any means. It's actually pretty cutting edge, obviously. Mm-hmm. But more so is what I'm saying is the sort of the tendency for him to discount the relevance or importance of the quarterback position roundly is a place where I think there's a bit of worthy criticism that needs to be levied Kyle Shanahan's way. As much as you can say, they haven't needed a quarterback in the past, right? They had Garoppolo, right. They went through Purdy, they had periods of all these different guys, but the commonality is that they have fallen short with all of these guys at any given point. whether it be in the NFC Championship or, one Super Bowl appearance. I think you can point toward the quarterback position capping the roster out. And before I just go full-blown critical, I need to acknowledge Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in the league. You need a guy with versatile skill set, a guy that can be a downhill runner at times. And he showed an inspired level of running when he got plugged in. It was almost night and day with Panthers McCaffrey. I think he was checked out of Carolina for a long time. And when he came to the Niners, I mean, he was running hard. He was hitting the hole. He was, getting to full speed before he even really hit the gap necessarily. And that was just a completely different version that none of us were used to seeing. I could say I saw it coming because I did trade for him in fantasy, but
from me, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, but I mean, we're talking about a fantasy league winning talent, and that's for a reason. Fantasy doesn't always translate to the real world, but at the end of the day, that is the case. Christian McCaffrey, what he brings from the passing game is the perfect marriage with Shanahan's scheme. Sorry, I can't hear myself that well. And that's really what stands out to me is that, as much as you could criticize the capital they gave up to bring him in, it's just such a perfect fit. How could you not? And the results were staggering. The results were exactly what they hoped for. I mean, he elevated the entire offense to a degree that was unfathomable, truthfully. Even though they did, again, fall short. But the other thing I'd point toward, you have the best tackle in the league in Trent Williams. He's again, number one at the position. I really feel like arguments in other people's favor are irrelevant. Trent Williams is just a utter game changer at the position. And that's kind of where I think you and I divide, right? Is as someone who's watched this division closely for so long, my perspective on McGlinchey leaving, McGlinchey, I felt for the Broncos, that was an overpay, 100%.
Right.
And they needed
We've talked
him,
about that, yeah.
Yeah, right. They bit the bullet, and they needed him, and they did it. But that doesn't mean that McGlinchey's not a good player, right?
Sure.
McGlinchey is a good player. He's definitely a above-average starter for that right tackle spot. And this is where I think when I say a philosophy's run its course a little bit, you start to get in trouble from the 49ers' perspective to me when you've gotten away with this for so long. But exactly how were you getting away with this, right? You now are in a position to where you're going to need to field Spencer Burford at right guard, Colton McKivitz at right tackle. Neither of these guys are sure things, if not even, starting level. I would say they're vastly unproven, both of these guys. So that right side of the line is an obvious weakness, an obvious area in which teams can attack them and make life hell for whatever quarterback's under center, whether it's Purdy, Darnold, Lance. To me, I don't think it really matters. I think it's going to be a wait-and-see thing. Is Purdy the guy? Is he as good as everybody thought he was? Can he play beyond that limitation? Because, I want to heap even more praise. Ayuk Samuel is an incredible duo for the receiver position, without a doubt. George Kittle is an excellent talent at the tight end spot when he's on the field. But
if you can stay healthy,
exactly. I think Brett Coleman on the Bootleg Football podcast said it best. This is the ultimate glass cannon of a franchise. Any of their key starters are injury risks from the top down, from Purdy to McCaffrey to Samuel. Ayuk is one of the only ones that hasn't had as many issues. Kittle, Trent Williams. The list, that's the list, but that's what is making us so high on this offense, and all of 100%. Those guys are injury risks. At the end of the day, I realize this breakdown series, we're going off of talent we see on the screen, not factoring injuries. But the reality of this roster is that injuries are going to be a massive factor for them. And on an
one way or another.
Exactly. And on an O-line that's already a weakness, a Trent Williams injury could be disastrous. Season ending, type of outcome. And for me, to sum up my thoughts, I'll bump it back to you, regardless of who's under center, Purdy, Darnold, to me, you're getting below average quarterback play. We talked about it in our prep somewhat prep, quote unquote, for the quarterback tier list. Purdy at best right now is not sitting above anybody's top 25 quarterbacks in the league. And I'd go a step further. I'm not a believer in Purdy's ability to push the ball downfield with accuracy. I think, that the Shanahan scheme is unique in its ability to create these insanely wide open looks for these guys, get them free, scheme up plays to where these are easy completions. And that's no fault of Purdy. He's playing within the scheme, doing what he needs to do, and he did a great job of it. But when it comes to explosive plays down the field, that's where I begin to question Purdy in his ball placement, just the arm strength alone. I think he's capped in that. He's not necessarily a show-stopping talent. And I know that I'm not telling anyone anything they don't already know by saying that, but it does need to be reaffirmed because, to me, the hype train on this Niner team is getting out of hand. It really is.
Well, let's just say that this is something that everybody already knows as well, is that the NFL is a copycat league, right? And what a beautiful quote there from Brett Coleman. Shout out to those guys. But yeah, I love that idea that this is the glass cannon, that just based off of what we see on the depth chart, right? Like, to me, this is the best, most well-rounded offense in the entire NFL. You have a premier running back, you have a premier tight end, you have quarterbacks.
Starting talent, 1,000%.
You just starting talent. It is just one of the most heavy-hitting offenses if everybody is healthy. I think, if every single one of those guys stays healthy through the first 6 weeks of the season, they could be 5-1, 6-0. Like, I don't think that's like an insane thing to think. But I will say another thing too that maybe people are not taking into consideration as much is that the NFL is a copycat league. It always has been. It always will be. And Kyle Shanahan, when you see an offense like this that is clearly on the cutting edge of scheming and, how effectively they can run outside zone and how they're creating separation for their receivers and how they're able to, put talent together to, generate yak and, your explosive plays for the 49ers are not 60-yard bombs down the field where you're dropping it in the breadbasket. It's you're dumping it off to Deebo Samuel, and just because of how everybody's spread across the field, he's got an open look to run for 40 yards or more. That's just how it works. And I think that the longer that we see Kyle Shanahan in the NFL running this type of offense, and the longer that we have coaches who have had success, in his regime go on to become head coaches themselves, namely DeMeco Ryans, that there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to start to figure this out. And it's really going to come down to how cutting edge can Kyle Shanahan really stay. Because the longer that teams are seeing these looks, I think that the Rams are a really great example. When Sean McVay came into the league, he was being talked about just like Kyle Shanahan was, just on the cutting edge of offense, how he was able to create space and, the things that he was doing with motion. It was one of the most cutting edge offenses we had seen up to that point.
Yeah.
And now I think that it's really not that hard of an offense to stop, even when you've got a guy like Matthew Stafford, who's got an absolute cannon, maybe not anymore. But, I think that that's maybe something to take into consideration as well, is that Kyle Shanahan has been there and has been very successful for a while now, and teams are going to start to figure that out. But, just based on the talent that, you see on the depth chart here, if everybody stays healthy, I don't care who you've got at the helm, let alone one of the premier head coaching talents in the NFL. This team is going to win a lot of football games. So if they can stay healthy, if Shanahan can continue to stay on the cutting edge and answer some of, repose questions to his offense that's already been answered, it's a bad metaphor. If you understand what I'm saying, if he can find a way to continue to make his offense creative and hard to scheme against defensively, I don't see any reason why people shouldn't still be incredibly high on this team. I think it's just really going to come down to the health and how they respond to defenses starting to adjust.
Yeah, well, and not to get into specifics of where I project them to be, but more so is I think the perspective of this is a 12, 13 win, bona fide, unquestioned top of the conference type, or top of the conference, even top of the division, but conference 2 type of team. It's thrown into question a little bit for me just because of this is some of the least they've worked with of their whole time. And going a step further with what you said on the Shanahan thing is he's been doing it for so long, maybe people are starting to figure it out. Sure, that's a fair point, but he's been doing it so long that now we almost start to take it for granted and say, this guy can truthfully do it with any team he wants to do it with.
Right.
And you know, there's limitations for every coach. There's strengths and weaknesses. And you know, going a little bit back to the quarterback thing, it's like I was hearing they're giving training camp snaps to Brandon Allen.
Interesting.
So, essentially, they have 4 quarterbacks that they're giving like legitimately important snaps to. It sort of indicates to me they don't plan to necessarily have Purdy for every game this year. They don't plan to have any of these guys for every game. Like, and you know the classic quote. I know it's a cliche to say, but if you have multiple quarterbacks, you have none. And you know there's a lot of strengths to Brock Purdy's game. The accuracy is one. Again, that has a potential to regress. We've only seen 1 year of it, but he showed off some really good accuracy. I would criticize a tad, say it's easy to be accurate when your wide receivers are wide open. But and then the final thing to close on the offense, would be, you know, I would be less concerned about the injury risk as well, if not for the fact that the depth on this team is honestly, at least on the offensive side of the ball, kind of atrocious in my opinion. To really just double down on that being a problem even further, they had a horrific draft, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a pretty common take that I've seen as well. Like I just did not draft very well.
The first offensive selection they made was a kicker in round 3.
Yes, in the third round, taking a kicker.
Which,
okay.
To be fair to Jake Moody, he's a really good college kicker, but
sure, yeah.
I don't really need to explain to the audience why taking a kicker in round 3 might not be the greatest move to make, unless we have the second coming of Justin Tucker here. We may very well make me eat those words, but who knows?
Sure.
It's still every draft pick is a dice roll at the end of the day. Let's leave it at that. And then the other thing would be, you know, no bias here, totally straight up with you. Cameron Latu was a guy that I was not high on as a tight end coming out of Bama. Crazy enough to say. It seems like everybody's high on Bama prospects these days. But, you know, there's a reason this guy wasn't a massive part of the plan in the passing attack over in Bama, you know, with prolific passers at the helm. He's definitely going to see a downgrade in the quarterback talent. And as of right now, outside of Ross Dwelly, who I guess is serviceable, this is your go-to guy as the backup to Kittle, who's known to miss time.
Right. This draft to me is it's almost like, you know, John Lynch was just like almost on his own hype train, right? Like, we are so good. Look at our roster. Look at our depth chart. We're the 49ers. We had one of the best offenses last year, the best defense last year, and so I'm just going to take whoever I want. I don't care.
Maybe a little bit. I mean, maybe it's another kind of, you know, egocentric statement about we don't care who the quarterback is. We're going to make it happen with whoever's at the helm. And as long as we have a reliable kicker, then we're going to put a whole bunch of points on the board, you know? To kind of just walk back what I've been saying, because it sounds like I'm super low on this squad. I'm really not. I just think that the ceiling that we're used to pinning them at of a 12-13 win, I think could come a little more down to earth. Maybe their ceiling could be 10 wins if everything falls the perfect way at quarterback and Purdy plays way more games than we thought, and Sam Darnold comes in and has a total renaissance for himself, which I'm not holding my breath for. You know, Darnold's been losing games for teams as long as I've watched him, for the pros at least now. So
yeah, and I will say I do disagree with you there. I think if everything fires on all cylinders, this is a 13-14 win team. I think that they can go compete with the best of them. I'm curious to see how that NFC Championship goes if Purdy can go the whole game. I think that would have been a hell of a game between even the Eagles and the Niners, and the Eagles are one of the premier teams in the NFL right now. So I do disagree with you a little bit there. But as far as, you know, just there, I think that there needs to be a little bit of caution taken because, I mean, yeah, you said it best. Like, you and I both know that, you know, CMC and Debo and George Kittle and Trent Williams, these are all guys that their bones are made of glass sometimes, and they miss significant time. And I think that could be the thing that limits them, right? If you have even one of those guys go down, it's going to hurt a lot, because I think you're right. I think that the depth here is not as phenomenal as it should be, or as it could be rather. So, if you lose one of those guys, it's going to hurt an awful lot, let alone if you lose just one of them. If you lose several of them, I mean, I could easily see this team, scraping together only 8 or 9 wins just because they have phenomenal talent, but nobody can stay on the field.
Yeah. I think the difference in opinion that we're having here is that you think the best case scenario is that Purdy plays every single game and they just roll. Whereas I think truthfully the best case scenario here is that you maybe have 3 or more spot starts across the season and then Purdy plays the rest. But if that happens,
I think you could, if you have 3 or 4 spot starts even at the beginning of the season, I think even with Darnold, who has never proven that he can be a consistently winning quarterback, let's say Purdy's out, let's say like 5 weeks, I think they win 3 or 4 of those games. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, it depends on. That's why I was looking actually right now on the schedule, because it really depends on when they fall. But this is no cakewalk of a schedule for the Niners. I would mention that as well. I mean, let me list a few. They've got Cowboys, Browns, Bengals, Seahawks twice, of course, Ravens, Jaguars, Vikings. These are teams with a legit amount of firepower, and
100%.
If you're just completely anemic on offense somehow, that could be pretty tough to win those games, even with this amazing defense.
Yes,
let's transition into that, please.
That was nice. Yeah, I like that. So this was the best defense in the NFL last year, hands down, in my opinion. They did lose DeMeco Ryans. Obviously, we talked about that with the AFC South. He went over to Houston. They did bring in a new defensive coordinator in Steve Wilks, who was the interim head coach in Carolina. I was just going to say, we sung Wilks' praise when we did the NFC South. I think he did a really, really phenomenal job down there in Carolina. I think he's a great fit. He's a really great hire. They were first in yardage last year and first in points allowed. We can talk a little bit about the roster here. They did have Javon Hargrave, Isaiah Oliver, Clelin Ferrell, and Jair Brown. They're all either staying or coming onto the team. They did lose Ebukam to the Vikings, if I'm not mistaken. We did talk a little bit about Ebukam at some point.
Yeah, I think that's probably a little bit bigger of a loss than people realize, but there's some influx of other talent too.
Yeah.
So
Also did lose Jimmy Ward, which is also going to hurt. But I think that you still do have players like Fred Warner and Hafunga and Dre Greenlaw and Tashawn Gibson, and obviously defensive player of the year winner Nick Bosa. I challenge you, Spencer, to find a weak spot on this defense. Like it's just an incredible defense coming in with another great head coach. Surely there's places where offenses will be able to attack, but this is a team that finished first in both yards and points allowed, second in takeaways, and first in turnover differential. So they're nasty. Yeah.
Let me start off with giving them their flowers on the front seven. I mean, good fucking God. You have Eric Armstead, who they foolishly picked over DeForest Buckner, but we'll talk about that further. However, good player in his own right, better than good, great player even. Really stout run defender, has some pass rush upside to his game as well. Obviously, Nick Bosa is a freak of nature. We don't need to get into that. And then, Javon Hargrave getting added into the mix here. I think this is more a symptom of the Kinlaw experiment not really going according to plan, although I will say I did hear he's been playing pretty good in training camp, so that'd be interesting if he starts to turn it on a little bit. That would be just another feather in their cap, so to speak. But, Javon Hargrave, it kind of feels like sort of a bailout from this Kinlaw thing's not going how we thought. Let's go ahead and pivot. Get a guy who we know, just get a sure thing, right? And they gave him the money to show. This was the premier free agent on the market, and they bring him into what was already a massive strength in that front seven, right? So the pairing Hargrave and Armstead as running mates, I think, is a great decision. because it allows Armstead to lean into his kind of main strength, which is kind of holding the point of attack. Not necessarily two gapping. He does attack in his own right, but I think he's just a little bit better in the run defense and just kind of being the, the focal point, so to speak. And then Hargrave can kind of do what he reinvented himself as in Philly. If you look at his Steelers tape, this was primarily a run defender with a tiny bit of pass rush upside, not developed at all at that point in his career. He was still young. And then he goes over to Philly and really, leans in, makes sort of a conscious decision to just reinvent himself and maybe tap into some untapped potential or, things that he knew he was capable of. But does become one of the premier rushers on that Philly D Super Bowl team. Obviously, he was a key cog in that. So, I think the combination of Hargrave knowing his role, he's going to come in, he's going to be pressure guy first and foremost, and Armstead getting to kind of take a step back and not overextend himself as much and just play his game more. That's a pairing that I love, obviously. And then going into sort of the additions that you mentioned, they bring in Clelin Ferrell, the former Raider, high first rounder, probably overdrafted at the time, but this guy had a lot of good things to his game and still does.
Great depth, because Bosa's also sort of made of glass bones in moments.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a couple of ACL tears on his resume, so it's definitely never a sure thing with him. And it's going to be interesting on that note to see how his semi holdout goes. He wants the bag, and I would be
he deserves
projecting
it. Player of the year, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's got all the leverage in this situation. That's what I'd say is, I'm expecting 35 plus mil a year. So they're getting to that point where they've really maxed this roster out. They have no more wiggle room. It's now or never for this squad in many ways. And the Hargrave addition just exemplifies that even further. They're pushing all the chips into the middle. But again, going back to Clelin Ferrell, considering Steve Wilkes plugging in at the defensive coordinator spot, so many before him have been great in this role. Even though I'd argue, D'Amico Ryans was very special, a very, very special coordinator, and is probably going to be an excellent head coach as well. Steve Wilkes is no slouch. He did a great job with the Panthers, turned them around. They had a bit of a defensive resurgence under him. And I expect that he's going to be key in getting guys like Clelin Ferrell to play the brand that the Niners want their D linemen to play. Clelin Ferrell, again, he's a very solid run defender. That was kind of, he's really just, I guess, a solid guy for the position in the sense that he's not going to wow you with any one thing, but he has some pass rush to him. He's a stout run defender. Washed out of the Raiders, probably more due to expectation than his own play, I would say.
Right.
Not meeting those heights that they were hoping he could achieve. But, and then to sum it off with, heaping the final amount of praise that I'm going to give them is that Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner is just hands down the best linebacking duo in the league. Dre Greenlaw, I can't say this guy's name right. He's an absolute monster. I think people remember that hit he put on Jake Hollister in the NFC Championship to close it out. That was a tough blow for as a Hawks fan. I'll tell you 100%. But that really shows the type of playmaker this guy is. He steps up in big moments. A big part of why they chose to move on from the Tennessee guy Al-Shair. Thank you, that they signed. He was a good player in his own right, probably a starting quality linebacker. But you have Greenlaw coming up to be paid as well, alongside Fred Warner, who you've already given the bag, you can't hold on to guys like that. But regardless, when you think about the kind of D-line talent they're fielding and then plugging those gaps as Greenlaw and Warner working the field and how rangy and electrically fast and explosive they are out there, they're just taking guys' heads off, and they're very gap sound. That's one of the things I'd say. Like, of all the linebackers in the league, there's very few that you could put on that same echelon of gap sound, great play at the linebacker spot that these two guys.
Okay. So, looking at the secondary here, obviously Travarius Ward is in my opinion, a very, very solid above average starter. as a corner in this league, and Hufanga has proven to be a very, very solid talent as well. And obviously, this is a team with high turnover differential at plus 13. So I mean, obviously they're having no problem getting the ball back on the defensive side of the ball, and I think that this secondary is certainly part of that. To me, if there was any sort of attackable weakness on this team, perhaps it's in the secondary, but I think, just with Ward and Hufanga and with Tashawn Gibson playing very, very well in tandem with already the dominant D-line forcing mistakes out of quarterbacks, this is just an incredibly solid secondary with already a phenomenal front seven that's just gonna rain hell as far as I'm concerned. If they're forcing mistakes off the ball, they're plugging gaps, can't get the run game going, they're gonna have to force the ball downfield, and these are certainly guys that are going to be able to exploit any mistakes that quarterbacks make, and certainly that front seven is gonna force a lot of them. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think we're in similar places with the secondary. I think where we're definitely a lot different in our opinions. I'm going to come with a little bit of a strong take here. I'm not going to lie.
Sure.
To me, Charvarius Ward, I feel this guy feels a little fraudulent to me at the corner spot.
Okay.
You said above average. I'm not feeling that. I think average is the right word. And honestly, for the average level of play and the positives that he brings, let me list some of the positives. He's a physical player, 100%. Sometimes too physical, which I'll get into, but and he's good in run support, right? Which I think that's kind of what they're leaning toward with this Niners secondary more than anything, is getting guys who can be at least secure tacklers at those corner spots. Play a pretty physical brand.
Right.
What I will say with Charvarius Ward is that, there's a reason Kansas City moved off of this guy for dudes that were unproven. 100%. If you look at the Kansas City secondary, there's guys we like. There's guys that stood out. Jalen Watson, to name a few. But, none of these guys were like showstoppers. And I think, Spagnuolo is not a bad coach at all. He's a very smart defensive coordinator.
Right.
And I think his decision to move off of Charvarius Ward was intentional because if you look at, and I know this is a little biased on my part, but on the Seattle game tape, watching Charvarius Ward try to defend Metcalf downfield, I mean, this guy is holding every single play, it feels like. And it's not the kind of holds where, like, that's the pushback I give to Sauce Gardner is like, I totally agree. Sauce needs to clean up the holding. It's a thing in his game. And it's going to get worse because, they're probably giving him a little bit of breaks as a rookie in the market and everything. Right. It's something he needs to clean up, but with his game, at least the holds a lot of the time, they are at least sneaky somewhat, right? You could sell them as hand fighting in some instances. When I watch film of Charvarius Ward just with his arms wrapped around the waist of Metcalf, dragging behind him like he's a caboose on a train, pretty much. I mean, it's so not subtle. Yeah. And I'm not saying it's easy to guard DK Metcalf. I'm not saying that one bit. But it's on Lockett too. It's on all these guys, and that was something that really bothers me as a Seattle fan, to be honest, is the lack of calls. And I understand you want to let him play quite a bit of the time, but with Charvarius Ward, it's like he's got good things to his game, but when I say fraudulent, I think that if you're going to ask him to man up on a guy who can beat him because he's more talented than him, it's going to be 10 times out of 10 he's getting roasted. And if he doesn't get helped out by the refs on no calls with cheap little holds and things along those lines, then he's getting toasted. That's just how I feel.
Spencer, I can't help but feel that some of this pain just comes from the fact that the Niners have kind of owned the Seahawks.
Oh
recently.
Yeah, I mean they swept us last year. I'm going to be 100% real about that, and they earned those victories 100%. Sure. But that being said, we were up on them at halftime, and if you check Niners Twitter, the tune they were singing was not the same as at the end of the game. The tune they were singing was, we need to start rethinking Shanahan at this point. I just don't know. And, I'm not going to get too far into the Niners fans, but that's kind of a summation of the way they are sometimes. If things are going great, then they're fucking ecstatic.
Niners fans on Twitter, you need to step up your game. You have an imposter among your mix. You're gonna have to.
Yeah, I mean, Niners Twitter, you need to attack Charvarius Ward if you see him holding. Because
no, I was talking about you. You're a man on the inside.
No.
You're all over that.
I'm a friend to all fan bases. You know, I'm not. I'll talk my smack, but at the end of the day, you know, I'm saying how I feel. I'm saying how I feel. And to go a little further, I want to go a little further into the secondary. Like Hufanga, I was very impressed with what he did in his first season. Hufanga was amazing. As far as, you know, there was a lot of people talking about, like, Polamalu status with Hufanga, which I think is just he's like a Polynesian guy with long hair.
Nobody is Polamalu. Yeah, let's get that straight.
But at the end of the day, like, I see why maybe some of them talk about him, because this guy's really all around. He's a great, strong safety. You know, he can play in the box at a really high level, but I was really impressed with how much he held up over the top. You know, this guy was making life easy on Charvarius Ward and Diamador Lenore, who I'll get into. You know, he was a 5th rounder. I think he played above expectation there out of Oregon. Yeah. But, I could see maybe a regression coming for these corners unless, like you're saying, I mean, obviously they're going to create a bunch of pressure and force mistakes like you're saying. But at some point, the refs got to start calling this stuff, right, Ryan? Am I out of my fucking mind here? Like,
you know, I also have a little bit of qualms with no calls. You know, with another team in this.
I wonder why that is. Is there a particular reason that you have a issue with no calls, Ryan?
Maybe it's just like the refs and the California teams. You know, you can't upset the big market. You know.
No. Yeah, it's all about the markets. Ask Sauce Gardner. But that being said, final thoughts. And I'm not trying to dump on them. I really like the Jair Brown pick at the top of round 3. That was really the only saving grace for their draft class, in my opinion. And maybe if they get lucky, he'll be able to play very early because
no doubt.
Tashawn Gibson put in a really good season. It kind of came out of nowhere, but at the end of the day, my opinion of Tashawn Gibson has not changed a lot from what I saw last season.
Sure.
He had a really good season. Respect to him for that.
Really good player.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, this is a career, you know, journeyman, and I expect him to again regress to maybe more close to that level of play in time. So, thankfully, I am as high on the front 7 as I am because all in all, I'm pretty low on this secondary. And that's going to be key in some of the points I have to make about our next team. So,
all right, and who might that be, Spencer?
Well. It's this little old team called the Seattle Seahawks.
The Supersonics? Oh, sorry, the Seahawks.
Just a squad that, for all intents and purposes, was left for dead last season by.
I would agree with that.
Everybody, unless you were
myself
Seahawks,
included.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go even further to say if any of you Cardinals, Rams, Niners fans say, fuck this guy, he's such a biased homer over here talking shit about the Niners that swept Seattle last year, or whoever it is, right? The Super Bowl winning Rams. What I'll tell you is that if you think I'm biased, then this is probably going to disprove it, because last year I was completely out on my own Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, I remember that.
All the way out. I was a doubter just as much as anyone, and that was the eye test. That was everything I saw. And you know, like everyone else, they proved me wrong. Came out, had an incredible season. One of the things I was most out on was the decision to start Geno Smith over Drew Lock coming out of training camp. I 100% did not believe in Geno Smith. I thought the story was written. I thought, you know, he showed issues with maturity on the Jets. You know, what else can be said? I mean, the level of play was really bad for large stretches, and maybe I underrated just how bad those Jets teams were that he was at the helm of. But again, you know, not telling you guys anything you don't already know. Geno Smith came in and completely changed everyone's perspective on what kind of player this is, and that's where I'm going to start it off.
He didn't write back though.
He ain't right back though, folks. And I told you, Ryan, leading into this episode, I'm so glad I gave myself to the very end of the breakdown series, because where I was at with Geno Smith, even at the end of last season, was just so wishy-washy. But now that I've had way more time to think about it and more time to look at the plays and really truly understand what he was working with, I have no hesitancy to tell you this is a top 15 quarterback in the NFL in his prime. And the only hesitancy I had coming into this episode I expressed to you was, I'm almost to the point of putting this guy top 10.
We discussed this. Yeah.
And it comes from a bunch of things. A lot of people feel Geno Smith, he was a very underdrafted prospect coming out. The kind of skill set this guy offers. He has above average mobility, incredible arm strength. And to go along with all of that, this is a young 30-year-old quarterback in his prime. He doesn't have a lot of snaps under his belt.
Basically sat 5 years.
Yes. And that has been really, I will say, as a sports fan, the most transformative and enthralling experiences of my entire sports life. Has been like totally being out on a guy, totally counting them out, and now we're a season removed, and he's arguably the most indispensable asset on this roster. It's astonishing. And it's been a blast being a Seahawks fan for the last year, and I'm sure it's going to continue going forward. So that's where I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I would say like a majority of, people that would call themselves NFL fans completely out on Geno Smith. I was like, oh my God, you have the choice of starting Geno Smith or Drew Lock.
Yeah.
We're looking at a top 5 pick right now.
Yeah.
But
and
just,
we were.
And you were.
Just not ours.
Just not, yeah. But I gotta say, like, this is why sports are great, right? Because this is a guy that never, like he had his opportunity, sure, but he was written off remarkably early in his career, I would say. And the fact that he now has been able to, maybe, it's just got to be, for some guys, I think it's a right spot, right time, right coaching, right scheme, right weapons. It's just all really come together in a way that like really, really revitalized Geno Smith's career. And it's phenomenal to see, because he gave us some of the most exciting quarterback play last year, just as a narrative, right? Like it's a phenomenal narrative to follow, and I am really envious of you as a Seahawks fan, because my God, what a honeypot to fall into when you think that, oh man, we got no quarterback, we got nothing, season's done, we're tanking, like let's just look at the prospects for next year and let's move on. To have a guy come out and not only be serviceable, but turn out to be an average to, if not an above average starter in the NFL. And I think that him coming out and doing that, and now the Seahawks and the coaching staff fully knowing what they have at their disposal and who this guy is and what his identity is as a quarterback and what he can bring you, I don't see any reason why he can't improve in the coming year, right? Because now they have a whole year of tape and like what worked, what didn't work, how can we, like, let's scheme around you, right? Like, we're giving you with Geno Smith, you're getting the keys to Seattle, and we're gonna let you rock and roll, baby. And I think he totally deserves that. As far as that goes, what a phenomenal player to have fall into your lap, so to speak. In a way, I think that's not my biggest concern with the Seahawks. But yeah, I think you said it best yourself. I think, Geno Smith, he played, I think last year, certainly top 15 quarterback. I think he's in the top half of the league. But I don't see any reason why, if he doesn't play even better, which I expect him to, because they're going to have a whole offseason with, knowing that he's going to be the guy. I don't see any reason why he's going to play any worse. So I think he's going to take yet another leap, and he's got some phenomenal weapons to do it, if I do say so myself.
Yes, 100%. I think when we talk about somehow people are making odds about a Geno Smith regression, this is where I just start scratching my head and I just say, are you guys really just anti-Seahawks? Like, is there some kind of bias I'm not seeing with some of these takes? Because, like, I just don't see a particular factor on the Seahawks offseason and the Seahawks offense that would point toward any kind of regression from Geno Smith. Mm-hmm. If you look at this offense, this is some of the best depth of a unit of any team in the league, period, to me, right? So let's start off with, obviously, they select Jackson Smith and Jigba, number 20 overall, adding what was already a bona fide top 5 wide receiver duo in Metcalf and Lockett, in my opinion. These are guys that have been just cooking defenses, been completely unguardable in single man coverage for the entire time they've been together. And now you're adding along with that a perfect fit as a pure slot in Jackson Smith and Jigba that may not even be capped as a full slot. We're talking about a guy that had 300 plus yards and 3 touchdowns in a single game in the Rose Bowl in college, right? Mm-hmm. CJ Stroud at quarterback, very comparable quarterback talent to Geno Smith in many ways, and the style of play, the arm talent, even the mobility. So a lot of the time you see slots, they come in, they do develop instantaneous chemistry with their quarterbacks just because it is such a, like a security blanket for the quarterback, that position. And that's kind of the way I see it is, now Geno Smith, like you said, has been given the opportunity to have say in the offense. He lobbied the front office specifically to take Jackson Smith and Jigba if he came available. So this is his guy. And again, I see his influence in the roster, that they're truly building around Geno. And I think that's kind of the whole intention of what you see change-wise, even down to the running back position. They add another second-round pick at running back in Zach Charbonnet. Mm-hmm. I think they want, the Seahawks have a very clear vision offensively on how they want to get it done. They want to use Geno Smith as that pure distributor point guard that also has the explosivity in the downfield throwing to capitalize and make you pay in instances where you cheat a little bit closer to that front to stop the likes of Charbonnet and Walker getting free on runs, or Jackson Smith underneath, right? It sets up for the strength of the offense, which is obviously Lockett and Metcalf downfield, to be even stronger because you have to now deal with all of these different threats, not even mentioning the tight end trio. So
yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that to me is what sets somebody like Geno Smith apart from somebody like Brock Purdy or Sam Darnold, right? Like talking about, being a game manager, being a point guard to distribute the ball, get them into the hands of playmakers, let's push the ball downfield in creative ways. The thing that sets Geno apart for me is that, if somebody gets burned, then Geno's going to burn you. He has no problem bombing that thing down the field, and he's very accurate downfield.
And he's got some player.
And he's got a big body wide receiver to throw it down there too. Great in one-on-one catches. I'm maybe not as high on DK as you are. We can get into that. But I mean, just the trio of Metcalf and Lockett, who Lockett remains one of the most underrated receivers in the entire NFL. That's a guy that can really blow the top off of an offense, and add JSN into it. We know what his skill set in college was. If that can translate into the NFL. In his first year, even a modicum, I think that there's going to be a lot of defenses that are going to end up looking a bit foolish, just with the pairing of Geno Smith being able to be deadly accurate downfield, and he's been in the league a long time, right? And this is the thing that I think is so interesting about him, is that I loved your point that you made that he's a young 30 years old. He has started not nearly the amount of games that most 30-year-old quarterbacks do, right? Like, there's a lot of 30-year-old quarterbacks that they have an ACL or two that they've had. They have been hit hundreds of times. They've had some really bad injuries through the years. But this is a guy that, he just never got his opportunity. He sat and, played the backup position for a long time. And this is a guy that's just now getting out onto the field, that's been in the league a long time, that has something to show, and now he can show it. Yeah, I think that, I liked your point as well about any teams that are trying to cheat up on the gaps with Kenneth Walker, any strong safeties that you're going to have to come on and assist in the run game. That there's going to be one of those receivers that can blow the top off of this. So yeah, I mean, as far as Geno paired with these guys that they're clearly building around, I agree with you. I don't see the Geno hate saying that there's going to be any sort of regression. This is a guy that you build around, right? And that you propel forward with how you're scheming and how you're building the offense. So
yeah, well, if you want to make that argument, then I would love to hear what you point toward. What position group do you point toward? Like, it almost becomes like an insult to Geno, like it's a critique of his intelligence or his IQ in the game. Like, if you can't assemble this array of weaponry and protection on your line with this guy, and he regresses somehow, then that has to be on him personally. So it seems almost like residual clinging on to this narrative that Geno just doesn't have it. And like, I just disagree completely with that. So.
Yeah, I also completely disagree with that. I mean, like, there's so many people. I don't know. It's got to be some sort of weird, like, Geno hangover that he's never come in and have been the guy. Maybe it's people who are saying that, he's had opportunities to go into games and win the job and he just never has. But to me, this is a guy that has finally got his shot. He has finally been given the keys to an offense. I don't see any reason why he should regress in the coming season.
No, and it's common with a year one breakout. People are always going to say, well, I need to see it again, hit the brakes. And I understand. I'm not going to be the first
like
to
say that. Like a Purdy, for example.
Yeah, 100%, right? The only difference being, like, I would say Brock Purdy didn't have the opportunity to sit behind the likes of Eli Manning, Phillip Rivers, all these great Hall of Fame level quarterbacks for as long as he did. Russell Wilson, he got to learn the position. He basically started from scratch on his game. I think that's a huge factor. You see, he plays very well within structure.
If there's one area of this team that makes me hesitate just a bit, it is going to be the O-line. Sure. I will say that they did well to find Crist and Lucas in last year's draft. They did start 2 rookie tackles last year, and they both flashed that they were solid starters. But kind of being thrust into that position. I think that Damian Lewis is probably the best lineman on that team, and if Crist and Lucas continue to develop after an impressive rookie season, that they were kind of just thrust into the position where they needed to go out there and start at both tackle positions as rookies. If they have some time to develop the maybe depth or talent of those players, they could play very well, or if they maybe regress, then, I think that things could fall apart rather quickly if either Crist or Lucas fails to develop in the way that they're going to need to. I would say just in general, Geno Smith and, the duo of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, as you were saying, the production just from the running game standpoint could be a little bit inconsistent, I think, just due to the blocking issues on the line. It's just a young line. That's going to happen. The Seattle yards before contact and pocket time were below average last season. So this isn't something that the Seahawks are unfamiliar with, I would say. But just the fact that you did have 2 draft picks that you had to go throw out there at tackle, and they were serviceable. I think you get a lot of reps. They did a pretty good job, and if they can, I think a lot of the offensive success is going to hinge on those 2 guys continuing to take steps forward. If those guys can continue to develop and become above average to premier starters in the league, then it could be very scary. Or if they take a step back, or if one of them gets hurt, I have questions about whether or not I think that will cap the ceiling of the offense. I guess I should say.
I would say that's overall a pretty fair criticism, but I would also say you're a little lower on Lucas than a majority of people. Lucas, he flashed a ton in terms of just outright dominating people in the run game. But the thing is that, like, people don't realize, right? Like, they were working with Austin Blythe at center, Phil Haynes, who is going to potentially be the starter again. This guy is, a replacement level guard essentially. And Austin Blythe was one of the worst centers in the league last season. It's why he retired from the NFL afterwards. But that being said, and then over to Damian Lewis as well, right? Damian Lewis is another guy. He flashes a little bit, but never really just like a stone wall necessarily. He's always going to be a little weak in the pass protection. He's a lot better in the run game. But the thing is like those three guys is nothing close to like a respectable interior offensive line, in my opinion.
Right.
That's what they were working with last year. And that really accentuates to me the fact that you're saying Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas were both solid. I think Cross was average as an NFL starter, and Lucas was above average already to me. So my thinking is, taking all of those rookie lumps, and now you're getting legit upgrades on the interior to go along with what should be a second-year jump for these two rookies, and Evan Brown at center, who put together really good seasons in Detroit. And then Damon Lewis is, a solid guy again. He's maybe a little above average, but not quite. The only thing I'd say the true concern for me is returning Phil Haynes, but they did draft Anthony Bradford to push him, another LSU alumni, just like Damian Lewis. So I think they're kind of rooting for him to take his position, but even if Phil Haynes starts, if an average guard or slightly below average guard is the weakest player on your offensive line, then I think you're doing pretty well. It seems to me where the difference resides is that I expect Lucas to take that jump into like Pro Bowl discussion level of talent on the right tackle spot. He's an absolute mauler. And was far, far better in pass protection than anybody realized or projected him to be coming out of WSU. So
the only thing that holds me back is that they did take their rookie lumps, as you said, as they did combined allow 16 sacks last year between the two of them.
100%. And
which
the other thing
it's just a rookie reps, right? Like it's NFL defenses, it's NFL D lines. Like
yes.
I don't think it's an ideal situation. And that was the other thing, too. I think heading into last season, why I was so out on the Seahawks was that, okay, you have you have two tackles that are rookies. You have Geno Smith. And it was...
It wasn't a good look at all.
It wasn't a good look. But I think they're both going to have to take a significant step forward for them to make a push for the division. Because they gotta clean some stuff up. But I certainly hope for the best. I would love if it'd be a phenomenal narrative if you could have two rookie tackles come into the league and just both make massive leaps, because they're kind of like thrust into a situation where they have to be the starters. I'd love nothing more for that to happen, but they're gonna have to step it up. And if they do regress or if they don't play better even, then I think it's gonna cap production to a certain extent.
All in all, I agree with you. If you want to look to the true weakness and potential issue in the offense overall, it's got to be on the line. But let's not forget, in closing, before we move to the defense, Charles Cross, a majority of his worst games and biggest struggles were against Nick fucking Bosa.
Right.
Like, what are we talking about here? It wasn't a cakewalk schedule-wise for these tackles. And again, let's not forget, Charles Cross, he was a bona fide top 10 selection in the first round. Like, if he got outperformed by Abe Lucas last season, and Abe Lucas is looking like the 10th overall guy, then I think it's relatively reasonable to expect jumps from both players, considering pedigree and then obviously how Lucas just exceeded expectations. But I digress.
Let's transition a little bit here over to the defense. I think this is another area that I think maybe just historically, as I'm sure that you can speak to, has sort of capped the ceiling for this team. They were 26th in yardage last year, and they were 25th in points allowed, so bottom third of the league. But they did bring back Bobby Wagner. They brought in Devin Bush, as well as Julian Love and Draymond Jones and Jaron Reed, drafting Devin Witherspoon. And they did lose Cody Barton and Poona Ford, but I think they could have maybe afforded that.
I would look at addition by loss with those two guys personally.
Yeah, I think last year, I think that's mostly just due to a little bit of growing pains under their new coordinator, Clint Hurt. He brought a sizable shift from what they were playing the year before was a 4-3, bringing into the 3-4 again, which, if I'm not mistaken, the Legion of Boom was a 3-4. Is that correct?
No, the Legion of Boom was 4-3 under.
They were also 4-3.
So
under.
they fielded Bobby, KJ, and Bruce Irvin.
Yeah, so like a historically seismic shift, shifting to the 3-4.
Yeah, total reinvention.
Yeah, total reinvention. So not all of the pieces of that puzzle are going to fit perfectly in the first year.
Right.
But I think in the second year things could get better now that they sort of have a season under the belt. I think adding Devin Bush and Draymond Jones, as well as Jaron Reed, and bringing back Bobby Wagner, of course, it's going to help that 3-4 settle into place where it needs to be. Yeah, and I think another place that we can maybe kick it off here is that I loved the Weatherspoon pick with the fifth overall pick in the draft. I know that you were pretty stoked about that. I'm sure that you have plenty to say. In addition, with an already impressive group of young talent in the secondary.
Yeah, well, to go into Witherspoon, like what I would start off saying, just covering the defense, is like the name of the game on whether this is indeed the unit to hold back what is likely to be a prolific offense, potentially a top 5 level production unit in the offense, in my opinion.
I don't know.
We don't have to get into you see, you disagree with me on Metcalf, but like I'm not sure what we disagree about there. Like I feel like if you felt the way I felt about Metcalf, then maybe you'd be more with me in top 5.
Yeah. So like, we can take a step back here. Okay. So
all right.
Metcalf, his rookie year, he had a phenomenal rookie year, right? 2019, 58 receptions on 100 targets, 900 yards, 7 touchdowns. Phenomenal rookie year. Next year took a big leap, 1,300 yards on 83 receptions, 10 touchdowns. Since then, I think his numbers have dropped off significantly, despite playing more games through the season. Had 75 receptions in 2021. I think maybe this is also a symptom of the Russell Wilson regression as well.
Right.
But if he's really that guy, like he's got the physical skill set to be, then I would think that he could get open no matter what. For only less than 1,000 yards, but he did have 12 touchdowns. I think most of those, what these numbers indicate, seem to have been in the red zone since the yardage wasn't there. And then in 2022, did have 90 receptions, but for just over 1,000 yards and only 6 touchdowns with Geno. So to me, I think that when he had that big breakout in his rookie year and then followed it up with a 1,300-yard season, his ceiling was staggering. But I think we're maybe looking at the fact that his ceiling has already been hit. I am not convinced that he's a top 10 receiver in the NFL at this point. I think that he certainly could be in the production standards. He could put up some numbers. But to me, he is there's certainly 10 guys in the NFL, I think, that are better than DK Metcalf right now.
I don't want to hit you with just like a trump card stat. I'm not that kind of fucking guy. But more than I think that I need to point toward this, right? In the first 4 seasons for a wide receiver, DK Metcalf is 23rd in receiving yardage all time. Mm-hmm. I don't think you heap the same criticisms toward Terry McLaurin, who sits just 3 spots ahead of him. Right? Like I think you're very convinced that Terry McLaurin is like an elite wide receiver. Right.
I wouldn't say that necessarily. No, I think there are 10 receivers that are better than McLaurin as well.
Okay, well,
but
this might have to wait.
I think DK is better than McLaurin. I will say that. I think DK is better than Terry McLaurin.
Okay, well, I mean, regardless of whether he's better or not, right? Like, I think it's the thing. This is the thing that really irritates me about rankings, is that like,
yeah,
it just because like this guy is 12th, let's say, and this guy's
sure.
10, according to like some random motherfucker's objective ranking,
right?
Is like that doesn't mean the difference between like 10 and 12 is even substantial
that much,
whatsoever.
right.
And the other thing I would point to, I'm not trying to roast you or anything. I think more so like when it comes to wide receivers, you're oftentimes picking your flavor. And the best thing you can look towards is like what fits the offense, right? What fits the role that you're asked to play. And then the best you can do is pull out statistics, which I did. But I digress. We can table that.
Yeah, no, I think that what I will say, just from a physical attribute standpoint, dude's a freak. And now that they maybe have more solid quarterback play, he maybe he can get back to that top gear.
And the other thing that I clearly disagree with you on is that you feel the ceiling has been reached with Metcalf. I'm not there at all. Like, I think he can get a hell of a lot better. And the other reason I would say that is because he's no longer playing with a quarterback that can't target him over the middle of the field at fucking all.
It turns out Russell Wilson was actually just bad.
Well, he wasn't. I mean, he wasn't bad. It's just he had clear limitations. And those affected his receivers. Yeah, it's like the Kyler Murray thing we talked about earlier. They're gonna target.
It's a wait and see.
Yeah, okay.
It's a wait and see
Fair
on Metcalf.
Fair enough. I'm not there. I'm not waiting and seeing. I've seen. But all right. Let me get back to my point though on the defense. Right.
Sure.
So hold on. I lost.
Yeah, with Witherspoon.
Right. Thank you. So
yes,
obviously. If there is a chance again that this is the unit that holds back the team and my predictions come true and we are a top 5 or top 10, whatever you want to call it, offense, that's going to be a huge bonus. It's going to get you into the deep playoff run territory no matter where your objective ranking would put them. To me, the thing that would limit this defense and make it a ceiling type of thing for the team overall would be obviously the run defense. It's the first thing you have to point toward. We were just completely abysmal in run defense last year. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It's a big part of why you get swept by the Niners last year in all 3 games you play against them. Because when you go against a team that is so, uniquely coached by a guy like Shanahan with a guy that perfectly fits the skill set that they want to run that scheme in McCaffrey, you're going to get eviscerated, not even mentioning what Debo brings.
There's a lot of victims of that,
100%. And I could even go into Josh Jacobs going for 200-plus on us and beating us in overtime. So, it was brutal from the run defense. But what I would say in defense of the defense, and Pete Carroll particularly, is they completely turned over this front seven. Every single starter on the D-line is now gone. From the interior D-line perspective, right? Shelby Harris, Poona Ford, all these guys are cut loose. And I think, personally, the decisions they made on who they replaced them with point toward a much more cohesive plan on how to improve that.
I would agree.
And my personal opinion on run defense is if you can at least have an average, top 15 run defense in the league, if you have a really good offense and you have excellent playmakers in the secondary and good coverage, that's going to be more than enough to get you on these deep playoff runs and potentially win Super Bowls. So if that's the plan, just get the run defense to a respectable level, then I can't hate on that because, again,
for sure.
Can you expect much more than that in a single season of turnover, even with all of the people they cut loose and all the additions they made, right?
Right. Yeah, it's just that complimentary football thing, right? And I think we just got to... All the Pete Carroll haters out there, I don't want to hear it. He is a phenomenal coach. He is a top 5 coach in this league.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
top 5.
Pete Carroll is a phenomenal coach, and I think that now that you've got another guy in Geno Smith that is going to be the guy moving forward, now is the time when we were talking about when GMs are noticing when their windows are opening. I think maybe a window is going to be open for the Seahawks soon. I think the future is phenomenally bright, and John Schneider has proven that he can draft really good talent. When they stick and pick, usually they trade back. But this is but it's moments like these that you trade back and you collect assets, right? So because when you need to revamp a line, where you have assets to be able to turn into talent. Yeah, so I think just from that perspective, when you've got a guy like Gino that you can give the keys to, and that really unlocks the potential of the offense, you're going to have a much easier time, transitioning to defenses, transitioning over to the defensive side of the ball, and saying, okay, look, this did not work. We need to revamp this. This is what we're going to need to focus on moving forward. We've got weapons on offense. Like let's get this into a place where we can play complementary football, right? And this is where we've talked a lot about this on the podcast so far, where if you've got a really high producing offense and you've got, even an average to a slightly above average defense, that's a really, really successful formula.
A la the Kansas City Chiefs.
A la the Kansas City Chiefs, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say, I agree with you. I got Pete Carroll number 5 right underneath Dennis Allen, so... No,
he does not make it through the season. I'm just saying.
There's no way. Jokes aside, though, to get a little more into the personnel, the first thing you got to mention here is the secondary is just unreal. It's just completely unreal from a talent perspective. You're fielding what has the potential to be. I've got flamed on this for going a little too strong in the past here by friends and family or whatever. But what has the potential to be a top 5 corner duo in the league in Reek Wolin? He just changed his name from Tariq to Reek, so let's respect that. And Devin Witherspoon, right? And I think in terms of the pick, like you said yourself, like a lot of times you could talk yourself into trading out of that spot, accruing more assets, set yourself up even better. But I would say, right, John Schneider has an incredible track record making these high first-round selections. It's why I'm so bullish on guys like Charles Cross, for instance. He, say what you will about John Schneider and his draft misses of the past. They've been things. They're real. Those have almost always
all GMs have them, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. They've always been late first-rounders, guys that he's taking off of upside more so. But, his track record with these top first round picks has been very good for a GM. He selected Earl Thomas, was the last one to take this level of high, and obviously we know he was a Hall of Fame level talent. Maybe won't make it in, but he was unreal when he was in Seattle. Everyone knows that. But so that being said, I trust Schneider's decision to take this kid at 5. Obviously, the story with Witherspoon is just phenomenal. A 0-star recruit in college coming out, was prepared to play community college ball to start off his college career. Goes to Illinois, was a basketball player. Hardly played any football before getting to Illinois and just breaking out to become an absolute superstar for them. And as far as...
That whole Illinois secondary was so phenomenally talented.
Want to it's like the college LOB, basically, was honestly what they were fielding. They had Jartavius Martin, Sidney Brown, Devin Witherspoon, like unreal. But that being said, to go a little further, the fit, I would say, in the secondary for Witherspoon is ideal. He complements Reek Wolin in the best way. Reek is a little bit more of a finesse player. He's going to take the ball away. He's going to shadow receivers downfield, run with them step for step. Witherspoon brings that other side of corner play, the Jalen Ramsey-esque, Jair Alexander-esque style of play. He's going to get in your face. He's going to get his hands on you. He's going to press you. He's going to menace you. He's going to emotionally disturb you with some of the things he'll say on the field. And, I just love the yin and yang between those two guys. Reek is such a carefree, happy dude out on the field, just does his thing, kind of lets his play do the talking, and Devin lets his mouth do the talking.
Yeah. You got to have both. Have both.
Yeah. So I would let you go a little further. I've been dominating the conversation. So.
No. I mean, it's your team, so... I agree. I think, if Witherspoon ends up working out in the way that we've seen on the tape that he has the potential, like just has the physical attributes to do so, and just the skill set to do so, alongside with Reek Wolin and Quandre Diggs, I think if he ends up working out, not only does that pick work out, but then you also have phenomenal depth, which I think has been a really big thing historically for the Seattle secondary, is that if you got a guy that's serviceable and they can't stay healthy, and then like the secondary just didn't have the depth and just kind of gets exposed. In fact, I would say you're probably going to disagree with me on this, but Jamal Adams is now the weakest part of the secondary. Based on the fact that the dude can never stay on the field.
In terms of availability, how could I argue with that? You know?
Yeah. Even here on the depth charts, it is still reading that he is out.
He's on the PUP list right now, but he is like fully healed. They're just getting in.
See, he's your Michael Thomas.
You 100%. I knew you were going to say
Thomas.
that. I totally knew you were going to say that. But it's valid. It's totally valid.
But yeah, I mean, I love what they've been doing here in the secondary. Reek Woolen had a phenomenal season last year. I think Quandre Diggs was very good there in the free safety spot. And if Devin Witherspoon ends up working out, the secondary could be very scary. I'm curious to see maybe what a Seattle secondary an incredibly talented Seattle secondary looks like in a 3-4 rather than the 4-3 we were used to in the Legion of Boom. So
right.
The top end there I think is definitely high potential. Well, that's what I would say. But yeah, like you said, I did want to address one of the issues, right? That you got to be able to stop the run. First and foremost, those guys are not going to get thrown at if people can run at you and get 200 yards a game and win a game in overtime by just handing off the ball.
At least on a passable level, right?
On a passable level. So if those issues are addressed and these picks end up hitting the way that obviously you and I believe that they could, that Reek Woolen's already hit. I obviously think that Quandre Diggs is also a very, very good player.
Yeah.
If that issue can get shored up, then it's going to be a very, very good secondary. And like we said, you just gotta, if you even have a defense that is just average or slightly better with a good offense, then that's a recipe. I think a window is opening.
Yeah.
For Seattle.
I think
it's
that's
a very, very bright future in Seattle.
I agree. I think that's the goal, is get this to an average to above average state defensively. I've waxed poetic endlessly on this platform about the Vic Fangio 3-4 scheme. It's one that is very Shanahan-esque in the way that it's been attempted to be reconfigured and copied onto other rosters. But, some of the things I mentioned for key figures on a Fangio defense is having a dominant interior D lineman. And I think the decision to give Draymond Jones one of the biggest contracts ever for a Seahawks free agent this offseason was tremendous. I think that was a very intentional decision to get a guy who, to be fair, he's much more of a pass-rushing interior threat than he is a run-stopping type of guy. But hyper athletic dude, very flew under the radar immensely with Denver, and I think people don't realize how much
100%.
That Denver defense was on the field. This guy's going to come out fresh and ready and tear shit up, in my opinion. I love the Draymond Jones signing, but the last thing I'd say for the Fangio defense and how it could contribute to run defense a little bit more is via the secondary. I'd point toward, you said Jamal Adams is like my white whale. That's totally true. But, let's just talk about that. The proposition of a healthy Jamal Adams and what he can do alongside a returning Bobby Wagner to just...
if he came back and he was healthy and he came back to form, then, it's crazy.
Totally
it's crazy scary,
stagnate run defense and with those guys. And not even just Jordan Brooks returning is a great run defender as well. But the last thing I'd say is, the one that fell under the radar of all of the additions this offseason was Julian Love. And I think that was a very intentional hedge to Jamal Adams to give them the versatility to play a very positionless brand of secondary ball, to where, J Love can play the nickel, give you great run defense out of the nickel, or Jamal Adams can switch with Jordan Brooks or Devin Bush at the linebacker spot and patrol the box with Bobby Wagner. So, you have a lot of interchangeability. You have the opportunity to get 3 safeties on the field if Jamal Adams were healthy, right? You can play him in the box a ton. You could play J Love and Diggs over the top to help out the corners. I see a formula at play here. It's just going to be a matter of, can they put these guys in the right positions to succeed. But I would point toward the final thing in closing. Pete Carroll is, to this day, the coach to have won the Super Bowl with the youngest roster overall of all time. And that record stands. So I wouldn't bet against him to put out another great defense here.
For sure. I think that's everything that I had lined up. I think it's time that we we are pushing time here a little bit, so I think it's time that we get down to our.
I'm sure we are.
Yeah, it's okay. Our NFC South episode was like almost 3 hours long.
Yeah,
we're
they're
at
used to it at this
right
point. Rumblers, you'll
yeah.
be fine.
So yeah, do you want me to kick off my division prediction, or do you?
I just talked for so long. You have
Sure.
to talk now. 100%. They're sick of listening to me.
So, like I said, I think that the window is opening for Seattle. The future is incredibly bright. Do I think that they're there yet? No, I do not think that they're there yet. I think they could potentially make the playoffs. I think certainly if Geno plays better, I think they're going to be a playoff team without a doubt. But that's not to say that you just got to go off of what I see on paper in front of me on the rosters. San Francisco 49ers have the best roster in the NFL. That is on paper. If everybody is healthy, I think they have the best roster in the NFL. In fact, I think I will say, however, clock's ticking. That clock's ticking.
Oh,
if
100%.
they don't win a Super Bowl, it is Super Bowl or bust. I think for the next year or two for the Niners. They were in the last 3 of 4 NFC title games, and when they did make it to the big one, they lost. Mm-hmm. The clock is ticking. This roster is not getting any healthier, as we know. This roster is not getting any younger. This roster is not getting any less expensive. So I think that their window is open right now. They got to push right now to win a Super Bowl. I think they are capable of winning a Super Bowl. They are one of my contenders coming out of the NFC. If all goes to plan, everybody stays healthy, I think that they are a Super Bowl caliber team. Whether or not everybody can stay healthy, that's a major question to me. But as it stands right now, I'm going to be taking the San Francisco 49ers to win the NFC West.
Yeah, I fully respect that decision.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you. I went back and forth on these two teams on who I was going to go with because I never want to come off on this platform as just the homer bias guy. You know, I really did rack my mind about who could come away with this division. And the thing to me, right, is the knowledge that the 49ers swept Seattle last year, right? It would be a magnanimous statement to make to say that Seattle could take this division, but to contextualize a little more where I sit with it and kind of the way I see it playing out, I would say, the age of sweeping either team at any point is over.
Right.
Decidedly over. And what I would say is Seattle and the Niners will most assuredly split games this year. I think it's going to be split games 100%. I think both teams will, however, sweep the rest of the division.
I think you're right about that, yeah.
And that being said, I think that kind of sets them up to actually be in very similar places with where they sit record-wise from their division alone, exact place-wise. And it's going to come down to how much success they have with other teams against other opponents out of the division. And what I will say is, first of all, I raise you the Philadelphia Eagles when you say the Niners are the best roster in the league. But the second thing I'd say is, the Niners are not far behind in that regard. But the difference being, I feel the Niners have truthfully regressed this offseason. They have not gotten better. They've gotten worse. And whereas they've gotten worse, Seattle has gotten significantly better. Significantly better. Decidedly. So, and for that reason, all of that combined really puts me I'm looking at this as almost neck and neck even between these squads in terms of talent. But I'll tell you what, the last thing, after looking through all these factors, what put me over the top to say Seattle's taking the division is they have Geno Smith.
Okay.
And the 49ers, they have, at best, bottom 25 in the league quarterback production. Even with the help and the encouragement and just dragging them along by their ear that Shanahan's going to do this year, I think the ceiling for this squad is bottom 25 quarterback play. And I think that at the end of the day, when you have this closeness going on between the talent level of the squads, then you got to look to the quarterback who's running the show. And
well, okay.
He ain't right back. So
He ain't right back though.
so yeah, I'm taking
well,
Seattle.
All right. Well, everybody, that is the last of our divisional breakdowns. We want to thank you so much for tuning in. We wanted to make sure that we got everybody's team in for our first bits of content here. Now is where we're going to get to the exciting stuff. We've got some good ideas planned. I think the next thing that you can expect to see from us is a quarterback tier list. I think that's going to be a really fun one. But yeah, we want to just thank everybody for sticking with us. I know that these are long episodes. These are long shows. Please like us and subscribe. Follow us on social media. Shoot us your thoughts. I'm sure that we have had some takes that are going to age incredibly poorly.
I'm gonna get some haters after this one.
You got all those the Silicon Valley tech bro hate. Right now from,
I can handle those losers. So come at me. Hey, that being said, though, Ryan, I just wanted to say, man, I know these aren't always the most exciting episodes, but really for me, like, I've had such a blast with you doing this and like
Agreed.
really like pushing ourselves on our knowledge level and really like showing off
100%.
what we know and what we don't know, frankly. But
100%.
Yeah, so that being said, I'm really excited to get into the more fun, more inventive, and following this season along with you. So just thank you for coming along the ride with me, man.
Oh, thank you too, Spencer. It's pleasure's been all mine. It's been great. And everybody, we will see you next time, and hope everybody has a great day, and we will catch you later.
Rumbler Nation.